Jim's in there. So, good afternoon. It's 12 p.m. I will call the City of Oak Harbor special workshop of July 31st to order. Today's workshop is all about capital projects presentation. We welcome this opportunity for the council to engage with city staff in a review of the city's capital projects. This meeting is open to the public, but public comment will not be taken. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the staff for their time in putting this together. We've been working a lot of hours on this, so I appreciate all of your time and efforts. This is the draft budget conversation, and I am looking to council to provide staff with a better understanding of their priorities as we move through the budget process. None of these things are set in stone. This is the start of the conversation to understand the application of council's priorities as they pertain to the budget. Choices have to be made today so that I am able to leverage all resources available within the city and achieve maximum efficiency gains. Priorities need to be realistic and achievable within the budget cycle so that we are providing tangible deliverables to the community, while also decreasing stress and crisis management for city staff. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy City Administrator, David Goldman, to present.
All right, thank you, Mayor. If you go to the next slide, Tim. Okay, David Goldman, Deputy City Administrator. So as part of the budget process, staff would like to obtain feedback from City Council on capital projects proposed for the 2025-26 biennial budget and the six-year 2025-2030 long-term capital plan. We've included approximately 100 capital projects for your review for this purpose. Many of these projects will be familiar to you, while some of them will be new. Projects are reflective of the priorities discussed by City Council and staff since the beginning of this year, which we expect to have in a document in the near future. In the interest of consistency, we ask that the council provide their input on capital projects compartmentalized to the areas that are within your agenda bill. There's 13 areas in the agenda bill, starting with finance, going through different areas of city operations, and ending with Parks and Recreation. Each department director is available to respond to questions you may have on these projects. Our intent is to incorporate council feedback from this meeting into these projects for inclusion in the 2025-26 biennial budget, which we presented to council with these updated projects included later this year as part of the mayor's preliminary proposed biennial budget. We have a timeline up here. And as you can see, based on this timeline, it's essential that we receive input from council at this meeting to be able to have sufficient time to incorporate that feedback into the biennial budget and the long-term capital plan. With that, I'd like to turn this over to our finance manager over accounting, Ashley Ramos, to go over the timeline. We also have Heidi Childs here, who's the subject matter expert with all the capital projects. As a team, we work with all the departments and the department directors regarding developing this plan. So everybody's here to be able to answer any questions you may have. But with that, Ashley, go ahead and, if you don't mind, going over the timeline.
Hello, my name is Ashley Ramos. I've been here since about early February, so I'm new to this process, but it's been a good learning opportunity, and I appreciate Dave and Heidi. Heidi's really done the bulk of the work here, and she'll be available for questions as needed. But as you can see, we're presenting today and hoping to get your answers so that we can put together the packet for, or just to put together the full budget, which is going to take the month of August. We'll present that in late September and have preliminary hearings in November.
All right, thank you. So next slide. Oh, here's some definitions that, that you'll come across when you're reviewing the information in your packet. Beginning fund balance, BFB is beginning fund balance. Those are funds that have been allocated by council in previous years that have been unspent in the previous years, and that's just carried forward automatically to the following year. Per our budget ordinance and our financial policies, unspent funds are automatically carried forward from year to year until such time when the council until such time when the project's done, or the council says we're not doing that project anymore, return the funds back to the original source. TBD is Transportation Benefit District. Those are transportation-related funds that the voters approved about going on 4 years now. Unsecured, so if you see the word grants, you'll see the word secured or unsecured next to the grant. A secured grant, those are associated with grants that we've received letters from the granting organizations that we've been awarded the grant. We're either currently receiving the funds for it or will be receiving reimbursable funds in the future. Unsecured funding we have not yet received an award letter from the funding agency. We may have applied for the grant, or maybe we're thinking about applying for the grant in the future, but that's something we put in there just to differentiate between the two types of grant sources. And you might see on hold on a project. That means that the department would like the project to remain in consideration, but it's currently not moving forward on that particular project for various reasons. You're not going to see a lot of projects with on hold. Next slide. So this is the overall data sheet for all the capital projects that's contained in your packet. This is pretty hard to read on screen and equally hard to read in your packet, but it's been the same form we've been using every biennial and actually every mid-biennial, because CAC doesn't update every mid-biennial as well, for years. With the new ERP software system, we're looking at coming up with a better way to showcase this, but for now, this is what we utilize to comprehensively show all the projects to the City Council, the years the projects will be allocated funding, and the type of funding. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have this list of the type of funding that the projects are receiving. It might be, general funding. It might just be from the proprietary source. Like if, for example, a water project, the funding might be from water operation funds. That's pretty typical. And then we have specialty funds like real estate excise tax is a big specialty fund. Those funds come in based on real estate sales in the city, and those funds are restricted for certain certain types of capital projects. And there's also limited use for maintenance too with those projects as well. With those funding, with the REIT source funding as well. As an example, there's other funding sources there too, but those are two pretty common examples you'll see. Next slide. So this is a continuation. There are 92 projects, so this is page 2. And next slide is the extension of page 2. It should be 11 by 17 paper in your packet to help read through these better.
David, for those folks that are visual, did you just want to give an explanation for what the different colors represent?
Oh, yeah, the different colors represent the different funds. That's all. Yeah, okay. And I think that's it, right? Tim? Oh, Tim's, that's the last slide, right? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So based on that, if you go into your packet, you'll see we grouped everything into 13 different areas for your input. So I guess we might as well go ahead and start with the first area for being finance. And the only project in finance is the ERP project. Are there any questions on the ERP project? All right. Just so you know, we're moving forward with it. We're going to start our implementation at the beginning of next year, and we're really excited to implement some efficiency improvements. So the next group are the general government project group. There's a few projects contained in that. Are there any questions on any of those projects? All right.
Okay, so, and I printed out the packet. So the general government, that would be the City Hall and Oak Harbor PD Station Facility Alternative Study.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to elaborate a little more on that beyond what's in the packet?
City Hall.
Does it make sense for us to put all these dollars into remodels and things like that if we're going to do a study looking to replace the facilities?
So the objective of some of those items is that what we're doing is making sure to take care of the building and address some of the concerns we have to make things more functional until we are able to address having a new city hall or police department facility or things like that. We have some space limitations right now. We also have some facility needs that we're trying to address. And we are likely to be in this facility and the police department facility for at least the next 10 years. And so we were anticipating for some of that and addressing them.
So if we're going to be here, if 10 years is kind of the goal,
Right.
then this study to replace these, I understand you don't want to do that, a year before you're looking to replace them.
Exactly.
But is this the time, or is this something that we're going to do 8 years going to go, well, market status has changed, let's redo this?
No, the goal is to do that now. We're already even starting to have meetings with the team. And what we're doing is doing some strategic planning, and this study will help with that because we'll need to talk about the financing, how we're going to go about this, what our needs are. And so this study will allow us to have that thoughtful conversation with the information we need to move forward.
Okay.
So in addition to City Administrator, Mayor, Steve Schuler's part of that team, I think all of the directors are part of that team, are they not? Sandra's
Most
part
of the
that team?
directors,
Yeah.
yes. And the goal of that is to talk about space, requirements, development services involved from permitting.
And overall city needs,
Yeah.
yeah. So just letting you know, that
And we'll involve
everyone's got
HR
a
as we
voice.
get closer so that we can talk about policies and things like that with the new building.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for all the hard work on this, gang. I know leading up to this, there's just a ton of stuff gone into this. So just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're hoping for from us today. Realize we're not approving a budget. This is not necessarily the budget that's going to come before us, but you're giving us an opportunity to ask questions on the items that you're proposing in the budget. I also noticed that you have each of these items within the departments prioritized on a scale of 1 to 10. I assume you're looking for feedback from us if you feel as though that priority list should be different. Is that the type of feedback you're looking for from us, or is this more of us just getting questions now to prepare for those conversations when a budget comes in front of us?
Well, we're not necessarily looking for feedback on the actual priority list that the departments put the items in, specifically in that, but we're looking for more general feedback on different capital projects. For example, if you were to look and see that, maybe there's a priority for a department that's a 7 and you're just wondering why it's a 7 instead of a 4 or such, definitely that'd be a question that you can ask the department directors and they could provide you feedback for that. It might have to do with like operational capacity requirements, or it might have other things to do with like maybe there's unfunded mandates that we have to have other items at a higher priority than that priority, for example. But you also may have questions on the project itself. Maybe there's a new project that you haven't seen before and you just want more clarification on that, or maybe you have a project in mind that you thought would be in here but it's not in here and you're just wondering about that, for example. We just want to be able to provide the city council with the opportunity to provide us direction so that we can finalize this part of the budget and make sure that we get the rest of the budget done in time for the September workshop so we can provide the entire budget to the city council.
So the intention today is, like a lot of workshops, for us to have the conversation to give you guys the guidance so that when you're put all the time and effort that you're going to put into taking the next steps, which is actually assembling the budget to place in front of us for that September workshop, that you're not putting a bunch of stuff in front of us that we have no clue what's going
Yeah.
on.
Because it does take a lot of work to put all these numbers together and put everything together, and we want to make sure that we get your feedback, incorporate all that, to make sure that we have everything ready for you at the time we present the budget for you. We're trying to avoid having like last-minute input into that, so we have to scramble and work until like 2 a.m. and, get everything together for you. We want to be able to provide enough time in order to incorporate your feedback into the budget, for the budget process.
All right, I appreciate that very much.
Well, and again, it's to make sure that we're working to achieve whatever your priorities are, right? And the other thing is, if you just take the first section of the 10, there are 10 items there. If we decide that there are 2 things that have to come out of there, we're not going to start at number 1, obviously. So, and we're also going to balance that with whatever feedback we get from you guys today. So this, again, was a proposal, and if you see priorities being different or our focus should be different, that's what this discussion, and that's why all of them are here to have that discussion today.
I have
Yes, Heidi?
I put these projects in order and by the year that they're going to be expensed, not necessarily a priority by you guys.
Oh,
So,
okay, well, thank you.
It's in year, pretty much year order. So project's 25 and there's a project 27. 27 is going to be further down.
So it's, yeah, it's not.
Good. Anything else? Keep going? Okay.
All right, okay, great. So the next section would be development services. David Poole's here, and there's a bunch of projects in that. Some are more immediate projects, some are more long-term, like the economic development study and all that. So, yeah, is there any feedback for us or any questions for us on development services projects?
And I understand, because there's only, if I'm reading this list correctly, there's only 3 development service projects.
Yeah.
And these are pretty much all state mandated. I mean, there's some parts of it within that are not, but this is pretty much all stuff we've got to do, correct?
The first one's not.
Right, the two comprehensive plan items 2 and 3 are state mandated, climate change as well as land use. The first item is a Department of Ecology grant that Mr. Schuler and I are working on, and that's for the 2 lots that we own down here, one for the cleanup part of it. Another part of it is to do planning and imaging for the downtown. And the third part is an economic development analysis for the viability of the 2 lots as well as downtown to be done by C-Clear. $10,000 of that is matching money from the city, and that money will come from our economic development fund. So it's all basically paid for.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Okay, thank you. Next up is fire department projects. That includes the, the new fire station being worked on and a few other projects as well. How many are there? 2, we have 2. Yeah. West Side Fire Station and the fire station at 81 Flooring.
I will say I did talk to a lot of department heads, but fire is one I didn't talk to, and my apologies, just because it was just 2 items on it. So the flooring, need or want? Of course, there's different levels of what that means, but what's the situation there?
Sure, fair question. It's a need. It's the original flooring, so it's 32 years old. We do expect, we kind of looked, the lifespan, just so you know, of a fire station, this one was built as a 50-year model. So in a chance, in all likelihood, it won't need carpet change again for another 20 years. But it's probably past where it should have been replaced at. And it's a 2-phase project. So 2 years ago, we did the east side of the building. And so it's the intent this next year to do the west side of the building, which is really the crew quarters. It's where they live, their bunk rooms. It's pretty old and worn out.
Thank you.
Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's just kind of the residential indoor side, where the kitchen and the bunk rooms are. This isn't any part of the concrete bay or anything, just like the indoor flooring?
I'm sorry, what was that second
The
part?
flooring replacement, is it just that kind of residential side of the station? Or are we
Yes.
doing anything with the concrete or the bay?
Oh, correct. No, it's
Okay.
just interior.
Okay.
It's the living quarters, which is the bunk room, sleeping area, the hallway. Upstairs is the workout room and some other offices. Yeah, so just interior surfaces.
What is, sorry, this might not be relevant, but what is the plan for functioning in that station while the carpet is all being pulled up where the firefighters stay the night?
Well, they'll suck it up. No, we'll get by. My guess is it'll be a fairly quick process. In all likelihood, they'll be in working during the day, and at night, we'll We may move our bunks around just for nighttime, but we don't expect it to be a hindrance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anything
Come on,
else?
sleep at the fire, at the police station.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the police department. Let's see, it looks like, yeah, there's a few on there, about 11 or so. So are there any questions or clarifications or input for Chief Slowick? Or anybody else here who can maybe help out, answer the questions?
All right, run. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem does, yeah.
Sorry, leave it to me to ruin the flow.
No, it's okay.
The $1 million for the building remodel, I'm noticing, further down the list, we are going to be having a study about facility alternatives. I guess I'm just wondering about the timeline. There's clearly some things that need to be done immediately to make it usable.
That's
But
correct.
if we end up needing to build a whole new one or move the operation somewhere else, then obviously I don't want to spend a ton of money fixing it up. So do you have kind of an idea in your head about
Yeah.
the progress in which you want that to take?
So can you go through, I think, isn't almost 75% of this the roof or close to it?
No,
Okay.
yeah, those are two different projects.
Okay, so go through what that is, sorry.
Okay. So I will say that if we do move forward with this study and we are looking at a new building, that's why it's pushed out to 2028. We'll know at that point, what is the realization of a new building being built. And then I think we probably can drop this fund request and this not being expended. However, if we get a few years down the road and a new building is not on the horizon, we don't have a plan, we can't fund it, then we have needs where we've outgrown our space.
Exactly.
We're converting certain areas to evidence storage and just different things like that we have to expand in to make sure we're in state compliance. And that's taking up usable areas. Our workspaces are, as we grow staff, our workspaces are very limited as well. We have training needs that are, we're trying to use multi-purpose rooms to make that work. And being able to join those two buildings, I think, is the low-cost solution to gain some more working space. Additionally, we have some water intrusion in the walls of the old part of the building, which was built in the 50s, and that'll have to be looked at as well. So, definitely have some structural concerns over there.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that sounds reasonable. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it looks like about 1.7 million between, building remodel, the roof, locker rooms, and then, of course, the prosecutor stuff I'm rolling in there.
Yeah.
Right, because obviously if we did build a new building, we would probably do something better for them than what we've currently got them in the old house there on the back.
Definitely.
Yeah, at 1.7 million, obviously, it isn't going to go all the way to building a new building. But at the same time, I guess my question is, having somebody come in and do the locker room, restroom remodel this year, and then doing carpeting and the conference room next year, do you think that's going to cost a little bit more money than if we tackled it all at once? I know you're spreading it out for the 2 years, but I just want to make sure we're not cutting off our nose to spite our face just because we're trying to spread it out.
No, I think we can spread it out. I think that I talked to Councilmember Stuckey the other day, and one of the items, specifically the prosecutor's annex building, that is a space that was not occupied up till like 18 months ago. We had used that as storage space and also interview space for child interviews. And now it is office space 24/7 for at least 3 people, sometimes 4 people. That space specifically was painted over cosmetically about 8 years ago, and none of the siding that was deteriorating was replaced. It's now at a point where that encapsulated siding is falling apart, and I think that's definitely a building that needs to be looked at if we're going to occupy it, which we know will occupy for at least another 10 years. You know, I think that space has to be really looked at. You know, the roof is something that we'll have to really pay attention to, and I turn to Public Works to make that determination on where those items are. You know, the locker room and the flooring are definitely needs that we have. I know the fire chief talked about his flooring being past due. If you've been in our training room, our flooring is torn up, worn out, and you're down into concrete spaces, and we're using that for meeting rooms for the community, Citizens Academy training areas. There's tripping hazards and other concerns that we have. So, you know, those items definitely need to be looked at in the next couple of years.
Okay, thanks for that. And then when it comes to firearms, tasers, and gear replacement, I would assume we're on some sort of a cycle for that, and are in future budgets, are you going to try and incorporate that into your budget? I hate to see, you know, expected ongoing regular costs have to be a special budget request item, because if we get in a tight year, right, you know what happens, those things come on the chopping block, and those seem like essentials to me, so.
Definitely. What we've done is, this budget cycle, we've taken a different approach. We are looking at moving our portable radios, our firearms, our firearm optics, our ballistic vests, our body cameras, our tasers, our less lethal devices, all up into equipment rental program, where we know what the life cycles are. We know what the like firing count is in a gun. The body cameras are lasting us a specific amount of time. We have that amount. We know that we can get grants for them and then offset those costs when we can. But we think that moving them to equipment rental is the best approach in getting them out of capital requests for the future. However, to get us to that, we do have this period of time where we need to bring things current in some of our items. For example, the portable radios, that I've got that quote for those portable radios. We'll spend that money this year, and that won't be carried over. But we know that we have to bring some of our firearms current, and some of our less lethal devices current, where we need this capital request for this next biennium, or next 2 years.
And then just a final thing, I've gotten a couple of comments from constituents involving electric vehicles, right? And of course, they're looking at some of the difficulties Island Transit is experiencing, which is a total different deal. I get it, but I just wanted to let you know, there are people out there concerned about that. I did respond to them, letting them know that, we do have a mandate, coming down from the state, and that we are mandated to switch to electric where feasible and possible, and that we've been avoiding to do it in heavy equipment in areas where we don't think it's feasible and possible, and this is our attempt to try and come in compliance with the state rules and regulations and try and do it where feasible and possible. And unfortunately, the way to find out if it's feasible and possible is by doing it. So
definitely. And I will say that the 2 hybrid vehicles that we have been outstanding for us. Our gas-powered vehicles, we've had a lot of problems with transmissions, axle, CV joints, those type of things that we're getting a lot of maintenance, and there's a lot of downtime with those vehicles. Now they're getting, some of them are on the longer end of, we're waiting for vehicles to come in for replacement. But definitely a hybrid or an electric vehicle is what the future is looking like. I think that's definitely obtainable for us in our community and amount of travel that we do, which is often 60 miles to 90 miles a shift, 12-hour shift, so it's not that much. However, I'll just note that South Pasadena Police Department went to a fully electric fleet, EV fleet yesterday, and that's the first law enforcement agency. Is 100% of the patrol fleet is and admin fleet is electric now. So it's definitely a lot of agencies are moving that way.
So I just wanted to follow up to your comment about replacement costs, and just let you know that every member of this leadership team is very focused on forward-thinking and planning for replacement costs and making sure that we're making all of those considerations to be proactive. So, and the entire administration on my part too is heavily focused on that to make sure that we're not in these situations in 10 years or 15 years again. So, yeah,
So, real quick, about the, sorry to interrupt, just about the comment that Tony made about the rental fund. So we have 5 internal service funds, and one of them is a reserve for replacement fund. And basically how that works is we have a vehicle, or we have a piece of equipment, and we know what the useful life is. And then
Bless you.
what we do is we project out how much it'll cost to replace at that time in the future. So let's say it has a 10-year useful life. We do an estimate about how much that will cost in 10 years, like a fully outfitted vehicle, not just the vehicle itself, but with all the lights and everything else. And we take that and we divide by 10. And we collect 1/10 every year so that when the time comes, we have the money sitting there in order to go ahead and purchase things. So, sorry about that.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, probably preaching to the choir here, and it's nice to see that some of these things are becoming a priority. The police station, 1.7 million in remodels, another 10 years. I don't know that I see it. So I am happy to see the studies about replacement. I just, the 1.7 million, it feels like that would probably be 50 to 75% of the cost of a new station, possibly. So I guess that's where I'm at there is, I do wonder if there's a way to move it up on the priorities, to move total replacement up on the priorities. And even, I know this is doubling back a little bit, it's a workshop, so I think it's fine. Even with City Hall, with the needed improvements, I wonder if we would be better off to lease a building for the next 10 years. I really do. I think that might be of a lower cost. So certainly a conversation to keep having.
We don't disagree with you, but do you have a building in mind that we could lease? Because we've explored this. Yeah?
And Mayor Pro Tem brought it up, a year and a half, 2 years ago, the building next to the PBY Museum, the old People's Bank, is that partially leased at this point? Do we know the status of that building?
We can have a conversation offline about that building if you'd like.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I will say that as this team is built, we are currently and constantly looking, when a building's brought up, Mayor Pro Tem brought a building to us, we looked at it, examined it, look at the space, look at the information. Sandra and Steve do some walkthroughs or get some information to let us know about spacing. And a lot of times it comes down to the square footage. The square footage of what we have versus what that building offers is either less than or doesn't provide the ability for the growth that we need. So we are looking at that, and we appreciate any input that you have on that in the future.
Thank you for, by the way, on that note, thank you for taking seriously whenever I spot something I think might work. I email it, and you always come right back to me after having done a ton of research, and I really appreciate that.
Councilmember Stuckey.
On that building that the prosecutor uses, do they do that free of charge? Is that used for them free of charge? We don't charge them rent or anything like that for that building?
So that is a police department space, and then the prosecutor's office budget is in my budget as well. So that's cost comes out of there.
Gotcha. And then when we spoke the other day, you had talked about the bathroom in the locker room, and the bathroom may not be as bad as you would thought due to, could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so we did have some mold in the bathroom due to ventilation concerns. We did bring in a company to pressure wash, clean, and do some remediation there. It turned out a lot better than we thought it was going to be, so I think that we're going to evaluate that with Public Works and make that determination if that's still a need or where that priority needs to be at.
Sorry, I was taking notes. Anyone else? All right, great. Thank you for your comments, and carry on, David.
All right, thank you. So the next section is for Public Works. Public Works has a very large responsibility for the city. They're over all the utilities. Also, they're over streets and the TBD and arterials, and they're also over all the facilities too. So because of that, we split them up into 6 different areas. So the first area of Public Works that we'd like to discuss are the Streets, Arterials, and Transportation Benefit District projects. So if there are any feedback or questions on that, we're available to answer your questions. Steve Schuler's here. Alex should be back in a moment.
Councilmember Smith.
It's for Alex, based on a conversation we had the other day, but perhaps you can answer it, Steve. So, because it is new, and I kind of got the information, but I'm not sure if everyone has that. On the Safe Streets study, and then the Safe Streets study implementation, the idea is that study is required for some grants, and the implication, how am I struggling with the word? Implementation would only be done, obviously, if we got grants based on that study. Otherwise, that would go away.
Correct. Good summary. I think that what we tried to do is wrap all those ideas about traffic calming and, speed limits and chicanes or whatever it might be. And so we've got some local funds in there. And so even without a grant, the council and the mayor may move forward with a smaller project. It might be something like a speed bump in a particular area. So all of those are possible, but you're right. There's a lot of opportunities for federal and state grants right now, so we feel fairly confident that we will be able to get some funding in the future to do some larger projects.
And I'm not saying that the Safe Streets, just based on the two paragraphs here, is necessarily a waste of money, but the primary reason for that study is the attempt at getting grants. I understand there's other things, but that's the primary focus, is that is necessary to obtain certain grants, doing that Safe Streets study.
Yes, and then I would say on both a national, state, and local level, there's been a clear understanding from the data, which is worth just repeating because I think it's good for all of us to know. Our cars have gotten better and better, the air pegs are better, the crash technology is better, but pedestrians, we're still the same, and we're being hit by cars at a greater rate, and so really a lot of the focus is on pedestrian and other forms of traffic, because the data is still very sad, and especially in this country where the cars are causing severe damage. So it's a real safety focus is why this is coming down from the feds and the state for local agencies to get this funding. So elected leaders like you on multiple levels are seeing this and assigning more money to address this situation. So it'll be important for our community to figure out what that means for us.
Sure. And then on the roundabouts on 20, which I love seeing that on here, even though I understand that that is not in our control. There's a lot of utility work. I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but it is related. That utility work, lines and such, would likely only occur if these roundabouts were to happen. Is that correct? We're not just going to go do that without the roundabouts.
Yes, that's correct. It is, so we're well positioned to relocate our utilities when WashDOT comes through with their intersection improvement project. We don't know what those impacts are, but we want to be looking ahead to set aside some money for when they come through with roundabouts or whatever improvements they do. It's the WashDOT right-of-way. We've had these projects in the past where they send us a letter and say, in 9 months, you need to relocate your water main. And now that we're fairly certain the money is coming to our community for that corridor improvement, we want to set aside so we're prepared to move our facilities if needed.
When you say you're fairly certain it's coming for that, is that, remember we were talking to Dave Paul and such, and if I remember correctly, there was comments of maybe they get the fundage, but they didn't have the labor. Do we have any update on that, or maybe I'm...
That was a conversation of if local agencies would be willing or able to manage state projects.
Right.
And we notified them that we felt like we are positioned to manage the project. I don't believe we've heard anything back other than they had a study that showed only maybe 15% of local agencies said they had the capacity to manage those projects, and that there was not a formalized process for that. So that was back in December. I haven't heard anything since then.
Maybe it's a squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of a situation. Would love to see that roundabout. Last question, where did that rendition come from?
That actually
I've never
is
seen that
from-
rendition.
Yeah, that's from a joint effort of WashDOT and Oak Harbor in 2005.
Oh, geez.
There was the original analysis for this corridor, and at that time, they recommended roundabouts at the signalized intersections from Swantown all the way to Cabot.
So 20 years ago,
Yep.
there was a thought we needed that. And here we are 20 years later, still hoping to get that.
That's
Okay.
correct, yeah.
For those that are listening from the state watching this meeting, let's do it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just, Alex Warner's here, and also Sandra Place is here from Public Works, and so we'll go through each of these 6 areas individually, but just, I wanted to just give a couple of quick updates on the overall picture for Public Works. Number one, I'm just really excited. It's a joy for me to be here with this leadership team, you know, both the elected leaders and the staff and the mayor. This is really a blessing. I think we've got a lot of heavy things in front of us, but I'm very excited about the leadership moving forward. And so first, I just wanted to say, number one, we're going to go through the projects that we're recommending to go forward, but there's a whole list, over 14 of projects that we have canceled. And so a lot of those we've touched base on some level with most of you, but if you want to talk more about those, we can do that offline too. But we have really canceled a lot of projects that are not moving forward, and we're not recommending moving forward and did not make sense to us as we analyze them. So that's one key thing we're not going to talk about today, but we've really eliminated those. So we feel really confident about the ones we're bringing forward. We've done a lot of research. Some of these are things that have not been designed, right? So whatever that cost is just a preliminary guess. And that's normal, right? And then as we do the design, we'll have a much better analysis. And then lastly, as we've talked about before, this is a big year. You're going to be making major decisions about land use and where that goes. After you do that this year, you'll see in the budget, there's a number of things. There's a water comprehensive plan, a transportation comprehensive plan, a sewer comprehensive plan, et cetera. We will then be rebuilding the foundation for what Oak Harbor will be to get us to that year 2045. So that's another key piece of what's going on kind of behind the scenes.
So one of the other things that we are working towards is we're just beginning to vet out the accreditation for our Public Works Department, which opens up avenues of better financing options and other things for us as we start moving forward with some of these projects. It's going to be a long process. There's a lot of work involved. It'll take us probably 2 to 4 years to accomplish, but we are going to start that here in the next few months. So, yeah. Anything else? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a quick question on the Serendipity Lane mid-block crossing. Was this 72,000 part of the original $200,000 estimate for that project, or?
So the Serendipity Lane, as you recall, got knocked down to 100,000 then. That's what council then authorized.
Right.
And so the city has finished our portion of the work.
Okay.
And so the concrete work has been done. I'm going to use broad numbers. That was about $55,000. Then we went out and did the water line and some other things that we did, and that was roughly around 15,000. So we have, in essence, obligated 70,000 roughly out of that 100,000. The remaining funds, we have partnered with the Main Street Group, you know, per our staff study, and they are able to go out and purchase things. So like they're purchasing a wooden trellis down there and some plant materials and some soils. And so we will help pay for those things, but they're doing all the labor, and they're responsible for the maintenance and really the design of those things. And they're working very closely with Brian and Brandon with their expertise to take a look at those. Because honest, right now, they've volunteered to go ahead and take control of those, but we know in the future there may be a future group that may come and ask, you know, Brian to help with maintenance and things like that. So we wanted to make sure the irrigation system that went in is something that we know is a good one and that we could understand and be there at the very beginning. So that project is moving forward and will be done by the end of the year. And so there might be a little bit of, you know, carryover or something, just the way the invoicing works, but pretty much done this year.
So I guess my concern was, knowing that we authorized $100,000 for building that Serendipity Lane, did we know it was going to cost us an additional $72,000 after the fact to then put in a crosswalk, which then essentially makes our bill $172,000?
No, we just knew, this is what happens a lot in city government, is you finish this part of the road, and then people come to you and say, well, when are you going to do the other part of the road? And then you finish that part of the road, and then people come to you and say, when are you going to do the other part of the road? So we just knew that when we did Serendipity Lane, that someone's going to come to us and say, well, when are you going to put a crosswalk in? So there's no expectation at all about putting in a crosswalk. There's not a need to put in a crosswalk. We just knew that when people started walking Serendipity Lane and they get to the end, they're going to go, well, when are you going to make it easier for me to cross the street? So that was just the intent of that, if that makes sense. Yep.
It does. It just seems like a lot to put in the lights and everything. When we have other busy intersections or other busy locations where we could use potentially those lights, is that the highest and best use of those funds in order to put the lights at that crosswalk? Is the traffic that's going through there constitute that, or, you know?
That's
I guess,
that's
my
good
question.
feedback.
Yeah.
You're right. I think you're right. I think it would be depending on what neighborhood you're talking about, and
Right.
you're right. There could be other higher needs.
Okay. And then my other question is just the timing on the rest of the Woodby Avenue project. You know, it looks like planning would be in 2029 and construction in 2030. It just seems like a little ways out from what we just accomplished.
Yeah, I can speak to that one. So this is the section west of the work that was performed on Whidbey this last year, from Jib continuing over to Heller. And that project, or that portion of the street wasn't in, dire need of a rebuild.
Okay.
This one, it has some benefits of connecting sidewalk, a safe routes to school location. It would extend the bike lanes up to Heller Road. It's a little more complex than the previous Whidbey work we've done because it appears to be a retaining wall and some additional utility improvements. So the year there is really, in my mind, kind of telling the priority of it. It's not absolutely necessary we do it immediately. We just know that it's been asked and wanted to put a project together with a realistic cost of what it would do to complete that section of Whidbey Avenue.
Is that a potential grant recipient for the Safe Streets for All, given the proximity to the different schools and the neighborhoods and everything there? And
Yeah, I'd say it's a great candidate for that.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. And this may be a Alex question, I don't know, but looking at the SR 20 Southwest Eagle Vista, Southwest 24th project, we've got a developer obviously building, working on getting ready to build a considerable number of homes there. And in fact, we got two projects going there on Southwest 24th. What kind of traffic impact fees are we collecting for that? I mean, it's a $5.4 million bill that we're going to be picking up because of development, and I know we end up doing that sometimes, but aren't we collecting traffic impact fees from those developments to help offset some of that?
Yes, we collect the impact fees on those residential lots, a flat fee for each unit. And those impact fees have to be used for increased capacity, I believe is a-
So the rule with impact fees, we currently collect parks and transportation impact fees. And those impact fees need to be used for increased capacity. So if you have like a 1-lane, 2-lane road and you're going to a 4-lane road, or you're putting in a turn signal, or you're putting in a signal where there's no signal, those are things that can be contemplated as being increased capacity. As far as where the roundabout goes, though, I guess if there's calculations that show that a roundabout increases capacity over what's currently there, if there's calculations along those lines, then I think the rational nexus is there to be able to use those transportation impact fees for it. But we'd have to see those calculations to show that the capacity is increasing in order to justify the use of it too. And it doesn't necessarily, transportation doesn't necessarily mean only cars. Like if you're increasing the capacity of a roadway to provide areas for bikes, or even if there's no sidewalk and you're adding a sidewalk that increases pedestrian capacity, that also is eligible for impact fee usage.
Well, yeah, and it seems to me like all of the above would occur here. Obviously a left-hand turn out of that intersection now is pretty rough, and this would add a considerable amount of capacity. And again, I'm just thinking out loud, and I guess for the constituents out there, right, to make sure that they understand that we do collect these impact fees from these developers. And obviously, if we can get this grant funded, right, because it's a highway project, great. We use the state's grant funding, right? But locally, I just want to make sure that, we are conscious of that. So I guess
If there-
when we're looking at impact fees as we move forward, we have to be conscious of stuff like this, that I mean, it's a $5.5 million, so the largest item on your budget, aside from annual street improvements and Safe Street implementation, right? And it's triggered by development, right? And so, I'd like to obviously think that we can get state grant money for it because it's on SR 20, but if we can't, I'd like just as soon be digging into those impact fees, that are paid for by developers for this type of stuff if we can.
And if there's a match requirement for that grant, impact fees will certainly be eligible. And our financial policies actually state that if you have a project that's eligible to use impact fees, that we have to use the impact fees first, so.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a really good example of how we're going to move forward with just one area. So for example, you're going to go through this land use process, and you're going to determine 0 additional units are going to be assigned outside our current city limits or outside our current urban growth area in that area of that intersection, or you're going to decide 100, or you're going to decide 1,000, right? And all of that decision-making that you're going to make this year will go into that calculation. And then we're going to go ahead and redo our transportation comprehensive plan. And so we will take all this into consideration. Where does that additional capacity, those 5,500 units, where are they going to go? And that'll go into this transportation package. And then this city has not updated its traffic impact fee since 1996. And we are the lowest on a list of 70 Western Washington cities, we're the lowest in all of Western Washington. And so that's going to be a big financial discussion, right? That you're going to have to make these big decisions of what is the fair share of new development and how does that impact our economy, and those conversations we've had before. But that will be coming up then in the next couple of years. So great example. Thank you.
Actually, Steve, the discussion on impact fees might be coming up sooner. We're evaluating responses to an RFP we put out on impact fees, and we'll be bringing to council a proposal to approve whoever the highest scorer is on that process to council to evaluate. So that'll probably be coming up the next month or two.
All right, Councilman Brockmeyer.
Yeah. On that same thing there, so, understanding the development impact fees and the timing of projects and stuff, I guess. Where the car wash and the Sonic is being built, for instance, at the intersection of Barrington and Highway 20, I guess that intersection's obliterated. It's going to need a lot of work done. Is that something that we normally take into account? Is when the process of the development causes some of that damage, how is that handled, I guess?
Yeah, so that's part of our standard development process, is looking at the transportation impact analysis, and they analyze the intersections and look for any of those, level of service failings. So with that project specifically, we restricted some of the driveways and things, but it's not reaching a level of triggering any, significant intersection modifications.
So upon completion of a project like that, would we repave that intersection then?
Okay, I see where you're getting at. Yeah, any of the trench patches or things that they're cutting across the street, they're going to go through and do a nice finished pavement section and replace, the center median and the striping. Yes, that's all the responsibility of the developer.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Are we going to take a 5-minute recess? Wait for David to get back?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, we'll take a 7-minute recess. We'll come back at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Got past development services, that's important. And the
All right, it's 1 o'clock. We're all back. We're going to carry on. So carry on, Mr. Goldman.
All right, carry on. So the next section to discuss is Public Works Facilities projects. Those are the projects you'll find in Fund 510 on your sheets.
Makes sense.
So is there any feedback and discussion on Public Works Facilities projects?
That'll be two of you. You guys need to speak. Oh, shop floor. Never mind. That's not the one I thought it was. Oh, this is all. I think we're just waiting to see if there are any questions or comments. Where are you? What section are you covering right now, David? Fund 401 or?
Fund 510. That's
510.
Public Works Facility projects.
Okay.
Let's see how many items there are in that. That's 7 projects in that one. Shop floor restoration, covered storage, to shop further fence roof replacement, those kind of items.
Yes, I'm sorry, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we've been having discussion with the school district. It's always been kind of this thought that, maybe the school district eventually moves out to the backside out there. Is there, those discussions still continuing, or?
Yes, so we actually are picking those discussions up again this month, or August, I'm sorry, next month. We've already had some precursor conversations, but because they were going through budget issues and stuff, and we just started our process, but we are picking that up and moving that forward, so.
Yeah, I guess just my general thought is that covered storage, piggybacking that work, if that were to move forward, would seem logical to me. So I guess my thought would be if we see that those conversations are moving forward and that they may come to fruition, it may make sense to scoot that out a little bit and coincide with that project if it occurs.
So, yeah, and so in full transparency too, part of what we've tried to couple that with is a lot of the contracts that we've had with the school district are expired or out of date, and so we're trying to bring those up to date and tie all of this in as one discussion and take care of all of it at one time. So that's been the piece, is getting legal involved and having them go over stuff with us and then making sure that we know how we want to move forward and then move that forward. Yeah. Yes, Councilmember Stuckey.
I don't want to put words in your mouth here, Mr. Schuler, regarding the cupboard storage, because I do see that would be estimated for next year. Is that something that, of all the things you have on there, is that something that may not be that essential, that could be kicked down the line a little bit? I mean, 405,000 is, it's a decent chunk of change. Is that something you feel really needs to happen next year, or is that something that maybe is a little less essential than some of the other projects you're requesting?
No, I know you had excellent questions when we talked about, but I think I'll let maybe Sandra kind of address that in maybe some more detail for you.
Councilmember Stuckey, this is a project that has actually been pushed out. This is the 3rd budget cycle it's on. All the funds have been saved in the replacement fund. The problem has just been getting the project just bidded out and up and running. This specific the cover storage would be just for that north side of our building where we have all of the materials like rock and sand, and we potentially could store even more salt in there instead of doing them out of totes, as well as all the solid waste vehicles to be able to preserve the life of those. So to piggyback on what Councilmember Wiesner said, is it can be pushed off. It's not something that we have to have immediately, but it's something that is definitely desired to save the infrastructure of those assets, as well as to be able to get more supplies. But if we needed to build more covered storage because we have the school district coming out, that makes perfect sense that we could do it all at one time. Yes, that's definitely doable, but the money is already saved for this project. And it's just a matter of getting it bidded and out.
I'm just trying to figure out, things are 50,000, 75,000, I'm less hesitant about. I understand it's been pushed back. I'm just trying to figure out, is there $405,000 worth of value? And I know it's subjective, That's subjective. But could those funds be used better with something else? Or do we really feel like spending that money on that, we'll get that ROI by extending the life of things within a reasonable time frame?
I do feel that, my personal subjective opinion is yes, I do believe anything we can do to prolong the life of our assets, we should do. If we were not to use that money, it would revert back to those funds that already put the money into the replacement fund for them. So it would be dispersed based on that.
Okay, again, just because we're looking for feedback, I personally would just, I guess I feel I like the idea of that one being pushed back a little bit again, and it may be pushed back again, it may not, but I don't know, I'd need more information I can ask about online, but I feel like pushing that off may not be a bad idea.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
On the covered storage there, and this might be probably a question for Steve. Would the Harbor Green continue to be stored under the covered storage as well? Would it give us more room to be able to palletize that stuff? Are we still having a problem with moving the waste from the treatment plant like we were, or?
Yeah, I could just give you a quick update. You're right, so that we pay, and I think I have the numbers in my head, I may be slightly off, but we pay about $10,000 a year to move those biosolids that come from our clean water facility out to our gravel pit, and they convert that. And so what happens is they come out of the clean water facility, they're not very usable for most people. And so the good news, though, is the golf course is very excited. They've been taking it. They see the potential of it. But again, it comes in this form. They're used to having this nice liquid that they can spray down, and it goes. And so how to actually use that product has been the issue. And then Kindle and others have been reaching out again to all the different farms and different other users we've dealt with and new users to see if there's still interest in that and how we can, in essence, give it away. And so we've got some that are kind of interested, but again, it's not something that right now we have a lot of customers for, but it's not costing us too much to, in essence, get rid of it. In the scheme of things, it's very small. So it's not an issue right now, it's just that we have this potential to reuse stuff, so we're always looking at how we can recycle better, how we can reuse better. That kind of help with that question?
Yeah, and I had forgot that Mike was helping by taking some of that. That's pretty cool there. I know the guys at the treatment plant had long thought that if we had a way of palletizing that, whether it was putting it into, some type of machine that would bag that. I didn't know if that was going to be included in, because I knew at one point they were storing the biosolid out at the city shops in one of the undercovers, and wasn't sure if that was still the case, but thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else? All right, David.
All right, thank you. So now we'll go through the utility funds one at a time. We'll start with water. Those are Fund 401 or Fund 431 projects on your list. And let's see how many there are. It looks like there's about 11 water projects to go through. So we'll welcome your feedback and direction on those projects at this time.
Am I the only one that doesn't see it? I don't see it on the list. That's what I'm looking for on the master list.
It's on the second page.
Oh, sorry. That's why.
Yeah, it's on the top. It's in orange color or salmon color.
We got it.
And then in the packet itself, it's on page 6, if you print out your packet instead.
All right. We have any questions, comments? You just need a few more minutes to look through it. Take your time. I'm not trying to rush you. Just don't want to be missing anyone either. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Talk to me about the number 68, the West Side Reservoir exterior coating. I see the picture in our packet, and, I mean, it's not pretty, but the price tag at $400,000 seems like a lot for a cosmetic fix. Is this more than cosmetic? Can someone help me with that?
I think, again, this is just, continuing the longevity of our assets here. I personally don't have the specifics behind what kind of rusting or other things that would occur if we don't coat it, but it is, general practice to keep the steel protected. It's again, a critical asset for us, one of our reservoirs for our water system. But I don't have specifics as to, if we pushed it out, how would that decrease the
Gotcha. So-
lifespan of the project?
It's all the way
What do you
down
think?
to the steel, so we need to, do we know how that happened or why that happened? Is that normal?
And I don't know why I have this particular example in my mind, but for example, the Eiffel Tower, I think they paint it like, it's in my head. It's painted like, I think it's every 7 years, and, different metal, different process and everything like that, but it's very similar. Once you get stuff in underneath that undercoat and it starts getting in the metal, that's when it's hard to then chase down. So we try to stay on top of it.
Gotcha.
And so it's not an urgent matter that we need to go out and do it right now, but the fact that we're sealing that first outer coat peel off is not a good sign. That
Right.
means we need to start preparing and start putting money aside in order to, it's a fairly new reservoir system. It's
Yeah,
not
it
that
is.
old.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just, I would say just, normal maintenance, and yes, it is expensive because it's difficult work to get up that high, and then when you talk to the coating people, if you call it paint, they get really offended because it's not paint, it's coatings, and there's a lot of science into how they do it. Both the
So-
preparation, the priming, and then the coating.
Is this for a spot treatment or is the price to just coat the whole thing?
Yes, this
And
is
make it
a,
watertight?
not designed, but this is a very rough estimate of what it would take to do the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
That helps. Thank you. That makes a little more sense. And I think I had one more, but I lost it, so.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
On the water system plans and studies, I assume, are we getting some funding from the Navy or the City of Anacortes, means they're participating in that? I know we have a kind of a cost-sharing basis with the Navy. Does that apply to those studies also?
The general answer is no. We're responsible for, in essence, our city and what we do here. We will reference that we purchase our water wholesale from Anacortes. And then you're right, the piece that we will be looking at how that makes sense. For example, one thing you might be referencing is there's part of our water comes from a 1940s line that we then provide water to the Navy, and in essence comes from the north of the Deception Pass Bridge and comes through Anacortes. And so you're right, that'll all be part of the analysis, but the Water Comprehensive Plan itself will be paid for by us. And then the Navy has to do it on their side, and Anacortes has to do it on their side, and so all those will be combined to understand how they fit, how those three pieces fit together, but they don't really fund our part of the study.
So the Navy's actually going to be doing their own study side by side to our study, even though the water lines that transport here are our water lines, and we'll be studying also?
Well, again, not side by side, because when they do theirs and how they do theirs is a whole nother process, right? And they kind of live by different rules. They don't report to the state. But I mean, as part of our study of our water comprehensive plan, we will be reaching out to the Navy, for example, and saying, okay, what are your 20-year needs, right, for water? How is that different than it is now? And we will include that information in our plan so that we can provide them as a wholesale customer the water that they need in the year 2045.
I guess that same question trickles down to the SCADA upgrades. I mean, does any of that SCADA data or equipment have anything to do with supplying water to the Navy?
Excellent question. No, it really does not. No, when it hits, it goes to the Navy, then all that SCADA is all the stuff that's on the city side. So, yep, that's our city SCADA system does not manage or operate the Navy piece.
And then I guess we'll just carry that even further down, things like the well 9 replacement and any emergency reservoirs and stuff. How does that filter down you know, to the Navy ratepayers, so that, you know, it's just not all on the back of us. Obviously, we're responsible for supplying emergency water, I'm assuming, to the Navy, or if the transmission line below Deception Pass Bridge goes away, does the Navy just not have water?
No, and I've been very excited, and maybe Mayor Wright or Sabrina Coombs, you know, they've been setting up meetings with the folks higher up in the Navy to have those conversations, so maybe they'd be better to address kind of how we're going to address that going forward.
So we're working with the Navy, but we're just taking some time right now because we're dealing with the budget. So we just took a little break, but we are having those conversations about long-term, both with the Seaplane Lagoon, as well as connection potential and our water. So we're having all of those conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Just so you know, too, for more insight, there is more of a sense of urgency on the side of the Navy now to partner with the city. It's trying to get that to translate to national office, because we have a certain rapport with local folks, but then when we start dealing with people from DC, it can be a different approach that we have to take. So again, we're continuing to have those discussions and foster those relationships and we're moving it down the road, but it's not as quickly as we'd like. So.
And just in addition to that, a lot of it too is that we're looking at the legal documents like we were talking about earlier. We're really making sure we're looking through those documents, that we're working with the legal department, they're working with their folks. So we're just following the process very thoroughly.
In concluding some of the things that have carried over from previous administrations, we're at a little bit of an impasse in a different place as to what they interpret things to be and what we interpret things to be, and we're trying to meet them in the middle and just be able to bring this to finality and then move forward. So that's what we're working through right now. So. Anything else? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. I was just kind of curious what the delay on the well 9 replacement is. I mean, it seems we completed the feasibility in 2022, but we're not going to expect the design to be completed until next year.
I think that really just comes down to other projects taking priorities and staffing.
Okay.
I have a project manager working on it now, and we've heard from council that this is a priority, and we're going to keep it a priority for the next biennium. So I can just tell you that there's a renewed focus on the project.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing with that is that I think that's part of the reason that Steve Schuler really spoke about looking at the list and making sure that we have a clear list of projects that we can work through. I think that's one of the things that the directors have really taken very invested effort in, and seeing what we could actually do and the workload for our staff, because that's part of the morale conversation that we've been having as well. So I just wanted to make sure we're all aware of that.
Yeah.
So we're going to decommission one storage tank. Is there a possibility of putting another reservoir there?
Are you referring to the east side
To the east
reservoir
side
demolition?
reservoir demolition, yeah. Is there a possibility of replacing that?
It is a possibility, and this is a carryover project from, it's been through several cycles. It's going to be revisited as part of our next water comprehensive plan. So I would say that, it's not a certainty that it will be demolished. It is acknowledged that there's some seismic retrofitting that would be needed if we're going to keep that reservoir, or other options are full replacement, or removing it and putting some other facility there. I'd say just right now it's on the table. We're keeping it in here because we don't want to have it fall off the plate and just forget that it needs to be addressed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And again, I think an excellent example, and I think if we can repeat this so we kind of know how it's going to go, you're going to go over the next year over a land use study, and you're going to say, where are all these homes going to go? And as we've talked about, I mean, going from a city of 10,000 dwelling units and adding 5,500 is growth I don't think Over Harbor's ever seen, at least in the last 50 years. I mean, this is unprecedented. And so that deal that, the Island County, the state said you're going to need to grow by 9% over 25 years. And I think the agreement, as I understand it, is we've said we're not going to have a lot of growth in Camino Island. It's going to stay rural. We're going to keep the south end of the island rural. We're going to keep the central part of Woodby Island rural. And so therefore, instead of 9% over all the county, we're going to have 55% go into Oak Harbor. I understand that plan. That's going to preserve a lot more of that farmland and forest land and beaches in those other parts of the county, so those can stay rural. But what that means is, right, we've got this council and this mayor has a lot on their plate in that next year to determine where the growth goes. Then, once that's done, we will have the work of now doing the water comprehensive plan. We will now start to study how much storage do we need then to meet that demand, not even getting into, does the Navy want to participate in any
Right.
of that or not? And how hard is that to get them at the table in time? And then we will go and work with David Goldman at the end of the process to find out, okay, what does that mean for rates? And how does council and the mayor want to address that future growth and who pays for it and how that gets planned for?
Thank you, Steve. Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thanks, Steve. A couple of comments, I guess, and questions on the sewer side of things. And I think it goes back to some of my comments when we were looking at the rate adjustment for sewer. We've got $1 million over the next 2 years for clean water facility screens. And then we've got another $800,000 over the next 2 years for major operation and maintenance on the clean water facility. Yet we have an O&M, budget, built into the facility. So this is above and beyond that O&M. Screens, are these adding new screens, replacing existing screens? Why are they not part of regular operation and maintenance? Do they have a expected life expectancy? Why are they being budgeted this way?
But before we get into the sewer and wastewater, I tried to compartmentalize this so it was for each fund. So we were still in water, and I was wondering are we done with any comments on water before we move into the next section?
So are we done with fund? It was 401. So are we done with that fund? Sounds like it. Okay, yeah,
All right.
now I guess we can move into.
Yeah, now we're at wastewater and sewer, so.
There you go. Now your question.
Very good. So I think with the clean water facility especially, but with all things, I think the important thing is to have very direct communication as much as we can and also then get home by whatever hour we all want to get home by, right? So on those screens, when I first got here, I went down with Jack and I looked at them and he explained, and there is a need for additional screens. I would tell you as a professional, a person who is considered a regional expert in this area, that yes, there is a need there. But I immediately told Jack we're not going to do it. And yes, there's a need, but we're going to push this off. We're going to talk about it. So I have this in the budget because that need may grow as that plant starts to get older, and we're going to continue to watch how we're doing with compliance. And so I have this in there, but my goal is to push it off to the next biennium and not do it. But I'll have that talk with the operational staff. And we have excellent operational staff that, they want to do the right thing. And I'm the person that has to tell them, yes, I want you to do the right thing, but let's talk about costs and how we do that, right? And that's the role that I play working with the mayor and others, and Sabrina Coombs and others. So, yes, it's a need. It would be better if we had it, but I want to continue to keep looking at it. And so very good questions. And so we might need it in the future depending on the issues we start to have down there.
And to answer the question on rates, like I showed in the presentation, I think a month and a half ago, the overall sewer rate is split between debt service and everything else, like operating, capital, maintenance, and all that. And every, when we did our last rate study, they inputted in everything from the capital plan into the study, and then that's how the rates came about. So what we're going to do is use that same model and take whatever is approved for the budget for the capital plan and stick that into the model. And then we'll see if the current rates are sufficient to handle the capital needs over the next 6 years, or if the rates need to be adjusted too. There is a fund balance in the sewer fund that's pretty healthy, so we'd be looking at that as well to help fund some of these things. But we just have to wait until we're able to plug everything in to provide the city council with what we're looking for upcoming rates for the utilities in the future. We're set with our rates to the end of '25, So this will be something we'll bring to council mid-25, 2025, and then we'll provide options, and we'll have discussion, and we'll see where it goes from there.
So Steve, feel free to interject too. I am not an expert, but I have worked very hard to learn as much as I need to know for the different parts of our. Right. So these screens have a 12-year life, right? Is that right?
Those are different screens.
Different
You're
screens.
right.
So,
Yes,
okay.
it is a very complex thing, but right,
Yeah.
the membrane screens is a separate topic. and
So that's
we
different from
brought
these.
that up,
Okay.
and so these are the core screens.
Core screens, okay.
Yes.
So, but I mean, they still do
Right.
have a useful life, though,
They,
assigned to them.
totally-
Because that was part of his question. I just want to make sure that we were addressing that.
No, and I think you're addressing really three key points. One is we want to keep rates, knowing what we have right now today, right? We've got what we've got. We want to keep rates as the lowest possible. We want to stay in compliance with our permit. We don't want to push things off to future generations, though, right? I know we don't want to just continue to let things degrade and then we'll just let our grandchildren take care of it. So that's just going to be a constant balancing game. So these good questions are what we all need to be a part of. And so, yes, you can take that core screen off. Jack Robinson will say, Steve, why'd you do that? And I'll say, well, council did that. And then when I come to you and I say, I need core screens, and this is why, then you can add it back on.
Well,
But some of these things are just of that nature. They
Yeah, and
really
the
are.
reality is, I'm not looking at taking them off, I'm looking to try and understand, and I'm looking to, obviously, understand that these are capital projects we're talking about, and I'm trying to make sure that we try and keep operation and maintenance out of capital projects as much as we can, because otherwise, you know what happens, we find ourselves in a year where we're shortchanged on budget, right?
Right.
And the operation and maintenance stuff gets thrown aside, right, when it should have been dealt with as the most important priority, right? But when it comes in at the end as a capital project rather than as a budgeted operation and maintenance item, that's where we could find ourselves. And we have found ourselves as a city in that situation before, where we have had to put off maintenance because we didn't budget enough for operation and maintenance, and it became a capital project, and there just wasn't money to do it. So with the Clean Water Facility Major O&M, I notice you have that slated $400,000 for the next 2 years. What's to make you think that there's not going to be any major O&M above and beyond the O&M for
So
years past?
all these green sewer projects are, what we're trying to do is give you our best guess of what we need so that you can do proper rate planning and have a proper rate plan for today, but also look a few years ahead and not have any big, huge surprises, right? And so we're trying to balance that out. So that's
Well,
what
and you and I are on the same page, and that's why I'm
Yes.
asking why that 400,000 stops at the end of '26, right? What makes us think if we're asking for 400,000 in major operation and maintenance over the next 2 years, that we're not going to need in 2027 and 2028, and these are the figures we base our rates upon. And like my concern was when we're kicking the can down the road with the rates a little bit by extending them, right, is that we're going to find ourselves 20 years from now with increased maintenance and operation costs that are not in O&M, that have to come to capital projects, right? And we're having to remove money from other capital projects in order to fund increased operation and maintenance as the plant ages.
Yeah, no, and again, if you guys want to talk about sewer for 2 hours, let me know, because this is really getting fun now, and we'll eventually get to parks, and, but anyway, this is awesome. I think here's the key plan for sewer. I think this is maybe just good to spend a minute talking about. Again, you're going to go through, you're asked to add all this growth, right? And that's something that the county council now has voted on and the city council has now approved and moved forward with, right? So that's an assumed assumption. That's good because that means that's going to be housing for the future generations, right? You're going to make that a commitment to actually provide housing for future generations. And so when it comes to the clean water facility, being that this is my particular area of expertise, one of it is, and again, I'm just speaking with my sewer hat on only, throw me all the growth that you can throw me. It'll only make things better. Because I will come to you and say, and come to David and say, we should be charging an appropriate system development charge, and I know that's tough, but we want to charge developers their fair share. Remember, we were charging them $0 for over 10 years. They were getting, in essence, a free ride, which didn't seem fair, right? Now we're charging them an appropriate amount, right? And that goes up every year for a few more years. So we want to do that, and then we increase our base. because in the sewer business, 90+% of your costs are fixed. It doesn't really matter what's running through. So if I can run more stuff through, I can charge everybody less, and you can charge everybody less. So I'm really excited, and again, I'm just speaking from a sewer standpoint. It's really exciting for the existing customers that you're looking at all this growth, because we will be able to take this growth and we will be able to use it to benefit all of your customers and all of your citizens. So that citizen we were talking about, who's the grandma that's having a hard time just paying her water and sewer bill and staying in Oak Harbor, that will benefit her if we can bring that growth into the city and do the right kind of planning, because no matter what, we're going to have to spend this 90%. And then again, if we can run as much through it as possible, it just becomes more cost effective. And the really good cities look out 20 or 30 years. They have that kind of stability within their elected leaders, even though they change, that kind of stability within their staffing, that they look out 20 to 30, even 40 years.
I guess, again, just to reword my concern, why is it we have to supplement and I realize it's all out of the same fund. I realize the sewer fund, it's proprietary, money on sewer fund gets spent on sewer. But why do we have to augment our existing operation and maintenance budget on the sewer treatment plant by $400,000 over the next 2 years, but we have no inkling that we're going to need to augment it any more past that?
Because I think the fun way, I'm just trying to involve Heidi in the discussion here, just for fun on this table. Because Heidi told me, Steve, our current code says anytime we spend more than $50,000, we have to bring it to council as a capital project. I mean, so that's the idea. This is now big enough that it's a capital project, and we're talking about it during the capital project time. I don't care. You're right. It's all out of the same fund. I don't care if you call it operating or capital, and if we call a capital project over $200,000, that to me would be more appropriate, but it's for on the utility side. But that's why, because it's big enough that it's a capital project.
Well, and in reality, in reality, I mean, we do have line items in the operating budget that are over 50,000, but this particular one was seen to be, it was going to be spent on like capital type items, like, repair and replacement type of things that are capital related, which is why it was looked at as part of the capital plan. But yeah, we have repair and replacement lines that are over 50,000 throughout the budget. You know what I mean? So, but the main reason why it's here is because it's capital related, so.
And I'm not trying to help you. Is part of your concern, though, that it stops after 28? Is that what your concern is? 28?
Yeah, 26, yeah.
So I guess his concern is, why are we not seeing that going forward?
I think, and again, I'm just, my goal is to be as direct as possible and give you the best advice I can and not try to sugarcoat anything or anything like that. When we went through and we did our utility rate study, I was brand new to the city. I don't know the system that well when we went through that. Again, we're going to go through that process, back to what we just talked about. We're going to go through a process. We're going to redo our utility rate study at the end of that process, so a couple years from now. And we're going to have a better sense of all of this and how it all fits into that bigger picture. And so I would tell you, right, you've got a brand new membrane treatment plant, and I know it a lot better 2 years later, but I don't know, and there's not a consultant in the world that can tell you what it's really going to cost to maintain this thing. And any consultant that would tell you, I would tell them, okay, that's their best guess, and they're just giving that to you. But I mean, this is a complex matter. And again, our goal is to not spend money, and my goal is to not spend $400,000 and to push this off. But again, we're just trying to give you our best guess so that we're not trying to push everything off to a future generation.
So your best guess on an earmark?
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's an earmark at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to define it.
Okay, so you're not scrambling for it later on. You're kind of feeling as though you're going to need it over the next couple of years.
Just trying to give you a heads up. Yeah, this is about how much we think we might need. But again, if it's all sunny days, then we may not need it.
So
But if it's really rainy days, then we might need this and maybe a little more. Yeah.
Back to what I stated earlier, we're trying to, in your term, earmark the money. We're trying to plan for the rainy day. So we're not scrambling to find emergency funds.
Yeah, well, and you get where I'm coming from, right?
Yes.
If you earmark something for 2 years, you kind of think, well, that may be needed ongoing, right? And again, that's why we're here to discuss all this, right? We're trying to make sure you have the appropriate tools and dollars, and that we're not getting surprised later on with a request of something that, because we're all going to look at you like, well, why didn't you have your Swami hat on and predict that, Steve, right? So,
Yes.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wiesner. Anybody else for the good of the order? All right, I think we beat the crap out of that. Let's move on.
All right. Well, speaking of that, the next section is Public Works Solid Waste. So I think there's only one item in the solid waste or trash department. Is there any input or questions on the Peterbilt Labrie sidearm loader? Is that Labrie? Livery. Livery. Sidearm loader.
All right, any questions or comments on Fund 403? All right, hearing none, let's move on.
All right, the next fund is storm drain or storm water. There's 3 projects in there. That's Fund 434 or 404. Oh, it's on your screen.
Nothing? All right, moving on. Let's go, David.
Next item, we're moving on to Parks and Rec. Let's go ahead and just focus on the marina projects first, and then we can go over the rest of Parks and Rec next. So this section would be the marina projects. There is 7 marina projects.
Only. Questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. So, David, the Marina Breakwater Replacement and Mitigation Project, are we looking at just replacing our existing breakwaters, or are we looking at a bigger vision there? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense to continue to have docks as breakwaters.
Yep, that's a question that Brian probably would be best, well, Chris would be best situated to answer, but Brian is
Yeah.
here
So we have those
representing.
broken up into 2 projects. One is the Marina Breakwater, which we know from the evaluation of it, we have about 6 years left of that life before we can anticipate a major failure there. That's barring any major storm event. We've already had significant damage to it this last year. If we have another major failure or break, it's very likely our insurance might drop us.
Yeah, because we spent about $3.5 million on repairing those breakwaters, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, about $2 million in the last biennial cycle. Yeah. This is probably our most critical of the 3 major capital projects outside of dredging that needs to be addressed. To your point, what you're talking about with the marina renovations, that's the rest of the infrastructure systems. We know we have a little bit longer, assuming we have a little bit longer, I guess, educated guess on that. We do know that we're also at the end of life of a lot of those systems, as evidenced by the failure of the electrical system this last year. But that is a secondary project to the breakwater, which really is a major safety protective project.
Well, in my mind, speaking of earmarks, right? I mean, these are earmarks for major renovation of our marina, right? And let's face it, we don't have the money to do these, much less more. But this is going to be our marching orders, right, for grant funds and the communications we're having back in DC and stuff. I just really, and adamantly, and I know you and I have talked about this, in my mind, picture a whole different concept for breakwater for down there, doing what we've already done and repeating the mistakes we've already made. And I mean, let's face it, it's lasted 50 years, right? So not a huge mistake, but I think there's so much better we can do when protecting that marina, which will also reduce future dredging costs and make our bay more amicable to use for, paddle boats and kayaking, and that is that breakwater out, closer to, Mailer Point and Flintstone Dock. So I would like to see, I don't know how much work we've done on establishing that number, right? But I would really like to see, efforts towards establishing a number of what it would take to build a true breakwater like we see at other marinas where it's not the dock. Because I'd like to see the true number in there to make that happen, right? So that we're not shooting low. I mean, let's face it, we've had before where we've gone and asked for, $2 million for an $8 million project, and we've got it granted, and then we found ourselves not having the $6 million to complete it, and we hand back the $2 million, right?
So we've done some preliminary estimates on those numbers. And what we have in here is the repair and renovation of these infrastructure systems. We know that to replace them entirely with a new system, depending on the type that we use, you can expect that to be about 3 times the amount of what we have in here for repair of those, going in and pulling the rods and couplers and repairing the current breakwater. We have been seeking a date with council to have a special work session to talk specifically about the options and a little more about the costs, so you kind of understand that with finances. But when you consider all these projects, the marina has very successfully supported the ongoing operations and preventative maintenance of the marina for over the last 50 years, right? And those fees that are charged to be able to do that, we've successfully been able to do that. We're now at a point, though, that we're talking about major infrastructure, not since the marina was built, that the marina operations are not configured in a way to be able to support that kind of a major infrastructure replacement. We can take care of the dredging, which is what we consider part of that preventative maintenance, but the replacement of these major infrastructure things and the channel dredging, those are things that are going to require probably a different format for the marina. Whether that's looking at a port authority, or which opens us up to grant opportunities, or some kind of private development partnership, or even looking at how do we phase out the marina and what are the costs associated with doing that. Those are all things that council will need to consider over the next 6 to 10 years.
Yeah, well, it certainly goes back to my point, right, that I want to be working with real figures when we're discussing future funding sources, right, and how we fund it, whether it be through a port or just what. And, we're proposing here about $35 million worth of repairs and infrastructure upgrades, and it only makes sense to spend the appropriate amount of money to protect them. Right. And floating docks is not the way to protect that marina moving forward. It's not the way to prevent expensive dredging moving forward. It's not a way to allow us to unlandlock our mini harbor and create that connection to our downtown for possible passenger foot traffic or things where there's money attached to that. So, quite frankly, I think starting at the breakwater and working in is the way we have to do this. In the past, let's face it, when we built that marina, we built it and we built the marina and we didn't think about the rest of the bay, right? And how we constructed it would affect the rest of the bay. We have this perfect bay when you look at it from overhead. It's gorgeous, right? And if we could just protect that bay could be the source of all sorts of waterfront activity and commerce surrounded by our jewel, the marina. And so I just want to make sure that you have my support in thinking outside of the box as to how we're going to do that. And just reinventing what we already have is probably not the solution. And I just want to make sure we're dealing with realistic figures so that we are sitting down and figuring out how we're going to pay for this stuff, that we don't shortchange ourselves and find ourselves getting $7.5 million, but have a $15 million project to do with it and don't have the rest of the money.
Yeah. Appreciate those comments.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember, one thing just for all of council to know, Brian alluded to this briefly, but we are working on a September plan that goes into the October action meeting that would allow for you to review all of these options, see a little more detail, do a community meeting, and just really have an engaged conversation about what these options look like and how we want to move forward. I mean, if timelines were perfect, we could have done that before this process, but just with the information we've been gathering and the approach we want to take, we do want to sit down with you, have a tour, have a thorough review of the information, and then do a community session, and then move into a workshop where we talk through it in a little more detail. So we will be breaking that down in that process.
And in full transparency, the other reason that we don't have everything right now the way we wanted is because we've exhausted every avenue possible right now to find funding for this. So, and we are being told no everywhere. So that now we're getting creative and pitching different ideas to you guys to see what you want to do. So, yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
I think on that, with what the mayor said there, exhausting all of our avenues and continuing to be told no. There have been a lot of good ideas down there for at least the last 25 years, and we continue to get told no. I know, council was hoping that having a federal lobbyist or strategist would be our winning lottery ticket, but that wasn't the case. We don't have a strategist no more. And
No, I can speak to that if you like.
I wasn't even going there with it. Maybe we will in a minute. Getting to the fact that the breakwater will fail at some point in the next 6 years. It feels like if the breakwater, I didn't realize everybody didn't see their email, by the way. Sorry. It feels like if the breakwater fails, though, it feels like there's no marina. And even if we had the $7.5 million right now, with the way permitting in the water works, it feels like if we had the $7.5 million right now, it would be hard to get that permitted in time. And to know that that's just for repair for something that we know doesn't really work, and that it would be triple to put in something that would be long-term, I don't know where the $25 million comes from. And the marina it continues to be a priority for me, and I think the rest of council, but it's very concerning to me, and I guess we will continue to hope we find a winning lottery ticket, but I don't know what it is. I hope we're not to the point where we're throwing the towel, but it's concerning to think that you would be spending $10-11 million on dredging, and the breakwater is still going to fail at some point in the next 6 years, and unless we come up with that money, there's still no marina. It's concerning.
Yep. Don't despair, though. We're working on a solution, and
Good.
we're going to have these, like Sabrina said, we're going to have these conversations both with council and with the public, and yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, and if the mayor wanted to add anything, I wasn't judging what had went on there at all. I don't fully know.
Yeah, no worries. Not taking any judgment anyway. So we were having weekly, I guess you would call it, like team meetings with Chris and other folks. We're still exploring every avenue possible. We're not just going to stop with no. And again, we're looking at other possibilities. I've been meeting with Jack, who is on the South Whidbey port. So he's actually going to be part of our presentation next month with you guys. So I've been talking with a lot of folks and working with Brian and Chris, and I assure you that we've probably done more work in the last 3 months than our lobbyists did for the entire time that we were paying them. So the experience even going back to DC was a little frustrating for all of us. So we decided to end that relationship because we were paying, $8,000 a month?
Seven.
So, yeah. So it just wasn't yielding what we thought it was going to yield. So. Yeah.
And Mayor, to that, I think we weren't saying no for good with a lobbyist. We were just taking a pause to reevaluate and make sure that we were making the right choices going forward, and also looking at what are our needs as a city when we look at a lobbyist and what were some of the things that we want to pursue.
Yeah,
so just getting more planned out with what we've been doing.
Thank you. I mean, because again, no isn't the final answer that we're looking for. We have to find a solution to this. We realize that. So, and we weren't getting that with these folks. So, yeah. Anyone else? Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Brian, I was just curious on the FDOC repair, why that's 2026 versus next year.
For are you talking about storm damage repair phase 3?
Yes, sir.
So that's just with the timing for the permitting, I believe, for yeah.
I mean, if we get started, right, but I think it all, the discussion was around permits, and the timing that it takes to get that permit.
Yeah, and to, put together the bid packet, it's a long, drawn-out process, yeah.
Anyone else for the good? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. The replacement of the southern log boom, the description, where all the seals take their nap when it's adorable, and I love it. The description says that this is a Department of Ecology requirement?
That's correct.
Oh, DNR, Natural Resources requirement. I don't suppose DNR in their requirement has offered to fund any part of this venture?
I would have a whole list of capital projects for them if that was an option.
Indeed. So there's not been any planning, design, or is there a drop dead date for this? Or do we just have to look like we're working on it?
I don't know for you right now if there's like a
Is there a
complete
deadline?
buy. I think we just have to be showing progress. We have a few of those that we're working on right now, like the emergency erosion control on the shoreline.
Yeah.
We just have to show that we're doing planning efforts and working towards doing that. They understand that these have a lot of permitting requirements. It takes a lot of funding.
Yeah.
So as long as we can show that, we're working on progress for it, then we don't incur a compliance violation.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're not necessarily going to address it immediately, but it's definitely on our radar.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's helpful.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing? Okay. Next.
All right, thank you for your input on the marina. The next area is Parks and Recreation. In general, there are 20. Looks like there's 16 under Parks, and there's 4 under Parks and Recreation. So there's about 20 projects to discuss and provide input to us.
Councilmember Stuckey.
I guess I'm just kind of looking here for my colleagues. There's a lot of this having to do with equipment to deal with the ball fields. Is that a lot of that equipment to go with the ball fields?
Correct, yeah.
Just out of curiosity, why we made the ball fields a priority, how does all of my fellow council members feel about getting all that equipment for the ball fields? I mean, they're going based on our feedback, making the ball fields a priority, but I'm just curious if we feel that that's the route we want to go and get all this equipment and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, please.
I actually have been encouraging Brian for quite some time to acquire this equipment because I'll just use Fort Nugent as an example. It is getting it is a high use field. Football uses it, soccer uses it. Soccer uses it all year round. Their goalposts out there kind of rut up the ground, and it creates for pits. And so I actually went out there. I think, Steve, you were part of that discussion a couple of years ago. We went out there, and we had Tally out there, and Eric was out there. And one of the things that Tally had mentioned is that we need an aerator. We need to be able to aerate that field and be able to do new top dressing and such. And so it's something that I personally have been kind of pushing for at least a couple of years now to make sure that we address that. And that this equipment can then be used for all of our fields then. And so it'll take care of the baseball, it'll take care of the football and soccer fields. And so in order to get the fields up to the condition that the users would like to see it, this is, in my opinion, necessary equipment.
Yeah, so this is speaking to how do we be most efficient, especially around capital projects. So the additional staffing that council allowed us, as well as this equipment, will give us the ability to maintain these fields in a way that we don't have to do capital project renovations for a much longer time, right?
And then different topic, just for me personally, I wouldn't lose any sleep if the 7th Avenue Wetlands Trail Feasibility Study went away. That's not something I personally am feeling a need for. That's just me. And then regarding Freedom Park, there's discussion about disc golf and things like that. I know Freedom Park, for the most part, the idea of this grand outdoor sports thing is kind of on hold. I'm okay with it being on hold because I think we need to concentrate on the indoor, outdoor. So I'm okay with it being on hold. But we talked about BMX trails, Frisbee, stuff like that, but I don't see anything in here regarding that. Is it because it's not the level of a capital improvement project? Is that also kind of on hold? I mean, is there any update on that part?
No, it's in process. So the designer actually comes in tomorrow, and he's here for 7 days. And so Thursday and Friday, we'll be doing site visits with him, mapping out the trails. And then we do, along with this equipment, speaking of like maintaining stuff, I will be doing some of that trail work in-house. We've already bought the equipment for the trailheads and the disc golf course. So we anticipate that going in fall through this next spring.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a brief comment on the 7th Avenue Wetlands and Trail Feasibility Study. If that were in a vacuum, I would agree with Councilor Stuckey, but it's my understanding that this is a piece of the larger transportation action plan, or the IRTPO. There's the concept of having basically a trail system from Deception Pass all the way to the ferry. They call it the bridge to boat, and it's part of a long-term vision where we're going to take a series of different trails and try to link them together to create a top-to-bottom trail system. Am I totally out in left field with that, or is this study part of that plan?
And this was specific to the Northeast 7th Avenue
Correct.
Trail. I believe that's not part of the
Okay.
Bridge to Boat trail system, but it would be supportive of the IRTPO's funded active transportation plan
Okay.
that we had just approved. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so to go along with that, the funds that we have for this, with the Path and Trails and the IRTPO and Park Impact, we don't currently have other projects to put those towards. So it's kind of a niche funding source that can be used in only certain things, and that's what we have slotted for this. So this was a project that was put in before my time, but it starts with looking at available use and how we can put in trails into this land and connect that residential west side area into the east side of the 20.
Yeah, this one, it's been on the menu for a really long time.
Yeah.
So thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Wiesner.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with getting the proper equipment to maintain our fields. Quite frankly, they've almost fallen into a point of embarrassment, right? And this is nothing against you, Brian, because you've had a lot on your plate, right? And nothing against any of the staff who maintain. I just don't think we've given you the tools, literally, to maintain them properly. For the kids in our community, outdoor athletic sports, as Eric has dedicated his life to, is huge, right? It's one of the best things we can do for our community is to support the children, and we've had all these conversations about parks, right? And how little we supposedly value our parks because of the current discussion, but the reality is maintaining our parks and maintaining the infrastructure with the parks and making the parks a pleasant place for the people of our community to go is a priority for us. And I think, quite frankly, a lot of the things you have on this speak to that, right? I mean, we're sending a message, I think, fairly loud and clear to the community that we do support the parks. And, look, we've got, 3-4 parks that, are underutilized, under-energized, I think was one of the words you were using, right? That we're going to energize, right? And that's huge, and that's exciting, on top of a, $5 million park plan implementation in this budget. So, yeah, with that said, I'm, maintaining what we have certainly has to be a priority. Giving you the tools and equipment to maintain what we have has to be a priority. And then obviously enhancing what we have takes next step. And I think you've got that fairly well lined out. I will jump in a little bit on the 7th Avenue Wetland Trail Feasibility Study. Quite frankly, the biggest concern I have with that is if it was installed, maintaining it. I see it as just being an absolute nightmare. Right? That's a large, vast area where people can easily wander off trails unless we literally fence those trails in. How do you police all of those acreages? There's 1 or 2 trails punched in there now, right? Which we see what happens to those. Right? I would just hate to think, if we had, 10 or 15 trails going in for different directions, what we would end up with. Because I don't think it's feasible to think that we could fence that off. I don't think we could control after dusk access to it. I mean, we could try and put gates at different trails, but how do you do that and not just walk around the gate? So that's my problem there, and I think if we are going to do a feasibility study, just so you know that in order to get anything off the ground, that's what's going to have to be addressed, is how do we maintain that? How do we regulate access to it? How do we control the areas outside of the trail area so that we're not actually physically damaging the wetland that we're trying to enhance with the trail system? So I think that's probably going to be your biggest challenges in making that vision happen, is how do we just take care of it?
Yeah, and that's why it's a feasibility study, so that we can get that information and have good data for you to inform you guys on, what can we do here, what's going to be the cost, what's the perpetual maintenance cost of that, how does this fit in with our active transportation plan, yeah. And to maybe just speak real briefly to your other comments, which I appreciate that. We hear those families, like the softball families that came and spoke to council, why are you doing this capital project improvements for the baseball fields? Why not us? When are we going to get some of that love? And when they're making comments about the condition of the parks, it's not, you guys aren't mowing the fields, which is mostly what our parks maintenance has done previously. What they really want is kind of renovation and cleaning up of those areas and just, fresh coat of paint and nice lines and remove those lips and things like that. And so, again, that's what a lot of equipment goes towards, is the field renovations, being able to do that.
Councilmember Wittgenstein, you're awake.
Hey, I'm not been sleeping. To answer Councilmember Stuckey's question, I'm on board too. You can't go to the dentist and expect the dentist to use the improper tools to work on your teeth, right? So same thing kind of goes for our parks, that the right tools for the right job, so that they're in their tip-top shape for our adolescents and youth in our community. And continued to do that. The parks have been looking better every year, I think, and every time I'm out in them, I'm impressed with how much better they start to look. And I can only imagine we can elevate that with the correct equipment, and get them all up there and stuff. So just a big kudos to the whole department and the hard work that they put into keeping our parks
Thank you.
up where they're at. So.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Brian, my question is, why is the skate park project on hold?
Yeah, let's go with that one. The skate park was included with the three park renovation projects of Summer, Ridge Haven, and Catalina Park. We ended up dividing everything out a little bit. We phased it. We just had arbitrary numbers in for those renovations in like 2027. We put in some more actual estimates and then phased it so we can go after grant funding to really support the cost of those. The skate park, we left that arbitrary $68,000 in there because it really wasn't clear what the goal was here. So this has been an ongoing discussion with our Parks and Recreation Commission and the Arts Commission as well. They would like to move this project forward, but if we do that, we would fund it with like NEA grants. And I think what they're looking at is not necessarily resurfacing, doing concrete work, but more of a cleanup and a kind of an art project there of, power washing, removing the graffiti, having the community come as part of an event and put like purposeful street art there. And so they're really kind of defining what what the scope of this project is. So we left it outside of this biennial budget because that's still being developed. Really kind of as an earmark. When and if the commissions come to agreement of, okay, here's the scope and here's the funding we're going to go after to do that, I would rather do that by grant funding and community participation in kind and donations rather than taking out REIT for that. We'll bring that to council. And I'd anticipate that's probably going to happen in the next year or two before we get to 2027.
Okay. So I had kind of the same question as Councilmember Stuckey in terms of Freedom Park. I understand that we're doing a number of that work ourselves in terms of the trail development, but the big issue that we had initially going in utilizing that park was access. The road, the parking, all that kind of stuff. Are we going to be able to get that done for less than $50,000, or is that something that we should be planning for? I mean, what is the plan then to be able to utilize that space to its full potential? The walking trails and the disc golf at Freedom Park, I mean, how are we going to access that park? Where are people going to park? And can we create that for less than $50,000?
Yeah, so we'll do a lot of that work in-house, and those will be prohibitive parking areas, both from the Elwha and the Gun Club area. Okay. Because of the use of that and the amount of people that would access those at any one time, we don't need to do formalized hardscape parking areas.
Okay.
So that's where we'll start. When we look at putting in larger infrastructure like fields or things like that, then we'll have to look at access road improvements. And that's something that we have a group working on right now.
Okay, sounds good. And I also support the 7th Avenue wetland feasibility study because I think anytime we can activate green space and create more, active recreation for people, walking trails. I know people use that Friend Marsh all the time and walk those trails. And so with the development of 7th Avenue and the additional housing that's going out there, I think it would be a great community asset to be able to have that. And so I appreciate the work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ruiz, or Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Stuckey.
So I guess this is a question for David Goldman, because I still don't love this trade feasibility study. $160,000 just to see what we can do with it. I'm not a big fan of that. But one thing that was put up was I understand this is not really in next year's budget. We're looking a little farther down the line. But there's the $100,000 in park impact. And Ryan said there wasn't anything else that was earmarked for. What can that park impact, can that be used? I guess I'm a little uncertain on what exactly the use of that funds is.
Park impact fees and all impact fees in general could be used for construction. So if you notice in the top chart there, there's an amount for construction services of $100,000. That matches exactly the amount of park impact fees we have earmarked for the project. The other two areas are engineering services and pre-design. We won't be using impact fees for those because there's some question as to if you can use impact fees for those phases. But for the actual construction, you can definitely use impact fees. That's why we programmed the $100,000. But if you're asking what else the $100,000 park impact fee can be used, which I think you are, it can be used for any other type of construction, for any other expansion on a park. If you're just doing like replacement or maintenance, you can't use it. But if it's expanding, like adding a trail, for example, yes. Maybe you have a park that doesn't have a playground and you want to add a playground, yes. But if you're just simply replacing or maintaining, no.
So in the case of this
I can't read it.
So now I'm getting a little clearer picture. So the $160,000, that's not $160,000 for a feasibility study. It's the 10,000 engineering. So the $100,000, that's kind of just estimated constructing the trails.
It's a placeholder.
It's a
It's not
placeholder.
going to be 100,000. It'd probably be a lot more than that. And I also probably wouldn't use park impact fees for that. If anything, I might use that as a leverage with a grant.
A grant, okay.
But like I said, this project was put in before my time, and we haven't really changed anything with these numbers. Once we get the feasibility study, then we'll probably have more of a conversation about, okay, well, what is the cost? What is it we want to do there? What can we do there? And then what are some financing options? And we'll always go after alternative funding for new construction infrastructure like this.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because you did mention a couple times this was before your time, some of these projects were. Do you have general thoughts on, I mean, do you think, yes, this is absolutely something we should do, or? Well, I mean, I'd like to hear, as the Park and Rec Director, where we have so many things, most of these projects in this capital improvement are yours, because we're building a Honolulu Parks Department, so I understand most of them are going to be yours. But obviously, there's a pecking order of what's more important, what's not, and I'd love to hear your perspective, if you feel like this is worthy, or if you're like, maybe not so much, because it was before your time. You didn't have input on
We
it.
do have priorities on what we're, that come, especially from our commissions and what we heard from council on what you want us to address first. But we have a lot of balls in the air and are kind of looking at everything all at once too. We're fairly built out. We're kind of landlocked with available open space. And so we are looking at areas like Friend Marsh and, the 7th Avenue wetlands. What areas are not being utilized? What are the available recreational uses of those areas? That's all being looked at in preparation for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And I think that'll inform kind of how we go forward with it. I didn't remove this project simply because I'm curious. I don't know. I don't know what we can use that for, but that is a lot of land that currently is not being used for anything at all. And so even if it's simply a trail system that, helps families, which I know we do have quite a few over there that don't have easy, they use multimodal transportation. We had a family in that west side area that wanted to sign up their kids for one of our programs at the Interpretive Center. And she said, "Oh, but I don't drive. My husband's in the military. I don't drive, and we don't have a way to get down there." So I know that trail systems and connectivity in the community is really important to a lot of these families. So if we have funding available to look at, well, how can we improve that? Anything that would supplement the active transportation plan, then that's something that I am interested in doing.
So this is definitely more of a placeholder to see where it goes than yep, we're doing this and here's the day we're going to do it sort of a
We
deal.
just need the information, right?
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Councilmember Marshall.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. I'll tell you what's not a priority for me is Smith Park. No, that's all. Thanks.
Anyone else for the good of the order? All right, moving on. Let's go, David.
All right. So we're just left with what else? With the other, I guess. And the other stuff is basically Fund 502 vehicle equipment replacement, and then the IT upgrades. We have separate sheets in your backup regarding all the vehicles and equipment and the timeline for the vehicles and equipment replacements in Fund 502. And also we have the IT upgrade items. So now's the time to give us some feedback on those. And that's pretty much it, after that, unless I missed something.
Well, I'm going to do a brief recap too. So, go ahead, Councilmember Marshall. You had a question?
So if we're still talking parks, I think that we need to have a discussion as a council is what our priorities for.
I was
whichever
going to
project.
bring things back around too
Well, there
and
you go.
invite conversation for you guys, because I feel like I'm all about moving this along, but I think you guys need to have more fruitful discussion on things and make sure you're all on the same page, because what I don't want to have happen is in a month come back and then we're blowing up at a meeting. I would
Right.
rather us do that, have those conversations now. So
All right, I'll stand by and wait for you.
yeah, that's cool. So are there any things on the general items that he just laid out? Nothing there? All right, so going back through everything, we addressed those two things, so I'm good there. There was the whole issue about the structures for Public Works, I think it was 405,000 was the number that went with that. You guys want to have additional conversations around that? You want to talk about that more? I mean, because I know Councilmember Stuckey kind of feels like that can be pushed out further again. Now's your time. You've got Sandra here, you've got Steve here, the other thing that we need to keep in mind before we have the conversation is one of the questions that I posed to them is we are looking to potentially purchase a lot of new equipment, and where are we going to put all this equipment was my question. And that is a challenge for us. So this helps to assist with that, in support of it is what I'm saying. One of the other things, that we are kicking around and there's ideas about is there's the whole old bus barn with the school district property and all of that. So, and that would be perfect for housing some of this parks equipment because it would be very close in proximity. So anyway, I mean, there are multiple things we're looking at, but I wouldn't bank on the school property at this point in time because we haven't even begun those discussions. But so all of that was to say that that is another potential use of this additional storage facility, if that's what we're calling it, or structure. So go ahead, go. Everyone just talk. Open conversation.
And I guess I'm just trying to determine not so much kicking it down, just how notorious it is. I mean, yes, I understand there are items, and yes, I understand it's budgeted and we've got the money for it, but that doesn't mean that money can't be moved to other things. When we're talking things that are over $100,000, I mean, when it's $50,000, I'm not saying let's be frivolous, but there's a difference between $50,000 and for gutters and $400,000 for enclosures. And if the feeling up here is, yes, we definitely need that for the life of the equipment, and then I get that. I know it's kind of hard to assign a dollar amount. Hey, getting this gives us 2 more years on a garbage truck. I mean, you can't be that nitty gritty. I'm just wondering, we've gone this long without it. Is it worth $405,000? I guess and I don't know if there's a firm answer to that question. It's more of a subjective question.
So, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to give you perspective. Yeah. We've also kicked the can of the marina down the road 25 years, and look where we are now. So.
I'm in favor of protecting our investments. If that's, I think Sandra said it perfectly, is we want to preserve the longevity of what we have. We want to protect what we have, and this is something that has been funded. If we don't use this fund, if I heard you correctly, it goes back into the sources that it came from, so it's not like we can necessarily use it for other things. It goes back to those that contributed to this fund, and I think it's important that we protect our investments, and that this is something that we've identified, staff has identified as a need for years, and it's budgeted for. We have the money, and I fully support in following through with this. So.
And the reason why it goes back to those funds is because for each and every one of these replacement items, there's a formula. Well, remember, it's an internal service fund, so it gets all of its funding from elsewhere. So there's a formula built in for each and every one of these items, which Sandra does a amazingly wonderful job in keeping track of pretty much on like a weekly basis. So we can't just take the money in the pot and go, oh, let's apply it to this other thing, because then it's kind of unfair and unequitable to the funds where the money came from. That's why we have to return it. And then if we do something else, we have to do a different formula to bring it in. So.
And again, I also just want to preface to all of you up here, because you're not party to the conversations that we have on a weekly, monthly basis. I've really tasked this leadership team with being proactive in, protecting what we have, looking at replacement cost, earmarking money to make sure that we're not in positions where we're having to scramble to get things that the city needs or meet the needs of our community. So with that, yes, Councilmember Arms.
I agree with Eric. I think this is something that we need to look at. We're talking about the bus barn, but that could be forever. We have had really nasty weather, and the stuff needs to be protected. You know, when you're talking salt and all that, and especially when we're developing more, we're going to need more resources. So we need a place to keep what we have right now, so we don't have to go out and say, well, the thing rusted out because we had a really bad storm or we did something. So I'm with Eric. I think it's an important thing. We've pushed it off. We keep doing these things. We need to stop, and we need to say, hey, this is a priority, and I agree that it's a priority.
Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I'm also in agreement not to kick the can. We've been kicking the can on infrastructure and facilities in our community for as long as I can remember, and that's part of the reason why I'm sitting here, is so that we stop doing that, and that our great-grandkids have, long-lasting facilities and infrastructure and plans in place so that they don't have to stress about these things and it's already going, or at least for the most part. I mean, unrealistic in 50 years that everything's going to stay the same trajectory. But if we can get it in the right one and we can start forward thinking beyond patch this, patch this, patch this, patch this, which is how we've been living and most of our society has been living that way. Oak Harbor's not unique. We've got to get out of that. We have to start going long-term, and this is that start of that process for protecting our equipment and the needs of our community in those inclement weathers and all the times that we do have that long-term. Because if we don't do it now, we're going to be pressed to do it when we have more equipment than we have shelter for, or in those regards. So, yeah, I'm, again, not in favor of pushing this off.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Agree 100%.
Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Not much to add to what my colleagues are saying here. I think if we had a bunch of Freightliners, by all rights, park them outside. But we don't. We have a bunch of Peterbilts, right? So we are buying top-end equipment, and our mechanic staff is great at keeping these things on the road and getting the max life out of them. I mean, it is something, $405,000. I mean, if you look at maybe you get an extra year out of each vehicle, it pays for itself in one cycle. Then, so I certainly support it.
Councilmember Wiesner.
And I'm just going to basically reiterate something I already said, but I guess restate it. Absolutely, when it comes to protecting our investment, building infrastructure, being smart with the community's money, that's what we're here for. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I'm just going to go back to my comment that, this type of capital improvement is a great time for us to restart that conversation with the school district. And if that conversation is becoming fruitful and leading somewhere, and only at that point in time, then it would obviously make sense for us to continue that conversation before making the capital investment, because it could be tied into that other project. Obviously, that doesn't mean that, let's continue discussions for the next 3 years with them and continue kicking this down the road. But I think it is a great time, obviously, to re-engage that conversation. Let them know we're looking at making a capital project improvement to that facility, and so therefore, before making that capital improvement, we'd like to have that discussion with them to see if that's something that could come to fruition. I mean, obviously, they've been rethinking, the school district, timing-wise, is having to be rethinking their thought of moving those facilities up to Olympic View with the not having the money from the levy to do that, right? And so I'm just saying timing, I think, is right to re-engage that, and it could be proved to be a benefit to us. We could end up with this facility being built at the same time we're building out whatever we're building out for the school district, and then it could obviously incorporate the needs for that transition at the same time, rather than coming back 2-3 years from now saying, hey, we now need to expand that coverage storage because we need more additional because of this transaction. So totally in support of protecting and doing what's right by our people and putting in the infrastructure, and like I've always said, giving our staff the tools they need to be able to protect that infrastructure for us. Thanks.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and thank you. And again, I think over the next 2 months, we'll have a lot more information with respect to where we are with the school district. Again, those are just getting picked up now, again, so. All right, is that it on this topic before I bring back a couple more topics around? And I can't believe I'm gonna do this, but I really think that we need to talk about the marina more. So, you guys are looking for, or Jim, you specifically, Councilmember Wiesner, you were looking specifically for true numbers on the breakwater. And I still think the best thing to do, we can get you those true numbers for those true costs, but then come back next month with options for you guys with, you know, because you guys have been kicking around the idea way before my time with respect to making this a port district and different things. So we want to have all of those options and have all of those discussions in a workshop that is exclusive to this topic. Okay. All right. So
And Mayor,
Sorry.
that's a September timeline with an October action, so that's.
sorry.
what-
Well, yeah.
Just to
so-
make sure we're on the
But yeah,
same.
when there's no yeah. Again, it was just a workshop though in September to have the discussion.
And also, you know, we're going to have to put everything that we discussed today into the budget. So we're probably not going to be able to update the 7,500, sorry, the 7.5 million. You know, for the proposed budget, but, you know, depending on what the decision is, we could maybe get that in the final budget, you know, in November, so.
That sounds good? Yes. Okay. Okay. One of the other topics that was, you know, went back and forth was the Wetlands Trail feasibility study. Do we want to talk about that anymore? Or do we need to have any more discussion on that? Are you guys good? You're good? All right, this is your opportunity. I'm going to give you one more chance, and otherwise we're going to end the meeting. So is there anything else that you want to talk about?
On
or-
the Wetlands Trail, just because it only had the $100,000 in construction in it, but it didn't have the whole amount that we estimated for construction, we're probably just going to take that amount out and just focus on like the planning portion of it, you know? Because if we're only showing $100,000 that we're going to use for leveraging other money, it's kind of incomplete. It would need to show the whole picture. So, but we do have capital projects that just focus in on like the planning of something, and then we have another one coming later that shows the next phase. But just for consistency purposes, we're probably going to drop out that 100,000, and we'll just focus in on the planning phase of that particular project. 50 or 60, I gotta, yeah. Yep.
Because we don't have a defined scope until the study's done anyway. It's a
Right,
placeholder
that's,
number,
yeah,
so it
we're
doesn't make
working
a
on that,
difference.
yeah. And that is something that we're working on though. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. We didn't really go into details about the City Hall and OHPD facility alternatives study, but I just wanted to say how happy I was to see that on the list. I realize that we are not in a place financially right now to, you know, necessarily upgrade either of those facilities, but at least it's somewhere in the big picture and we're actually thinking about it. And so it makes me very happy to see that that's, you know, those thoughts are now being put on paper and committed to a timeline. So I don't know if you have any interesting details or factoids about the study that you'd like to tell us about, Sabrina?
Not at this time, but I think the biggest thing is I really appreciate our leadership team. We're coming together, we're meeting, like I said, every other month to really sit down and think about those ideas and what we're looking for. Additionally, Sandra is going to be having her quarterly meetings to talk about our current facilities so that we can keep staff up to date on what we're doing to keep these buildings functioning, so that staff isn't confused about any projects they see going on. And we're really working to inform staff more in general about these activities so that through info sharing and other things, they're hearing about these and not just seeing construction happen and be like, wait, why is City Hall getting this done? So we're really trying to work on that as a team, and I just appreciate everybody's teamwork on that.
So, and I just wanted to add to that, that I know it seems like sometimes that we're taking a lot of time on certain things, or like I'm saying to the general public right now, but there's an example like with Bothell where we were sharing stories at one of these meetings, and they had just finished their project, had a beautiful new city hall, and And then they realized they were having to convert supply closets into offices and stuff because they had already outgrown the space that they had just built. So we're trying to be super thoughtful in that way too, and anticipating what that looks like for our city, where we're going, the direction, so that we don't have those same challenges when we just finish a project. We're actually going to be able to move into it, live in it, and be in it and exist in it for a useful life. So.
Yeah, and to that note, we rely so heavily on your recommendations. I mean, you guys are the ones using these buildings and going out to all of these sites, and you know, as department heads and employees, what your needs are. So, and you know what's kind of coming down the pipeline and what, usable life something has. So when you get together and give us your list of priorities, that has a lot of weight to it because you're the professionals. So if you see that something is happening that you're going to need to plan for or going to need to replace, ask for what you want. It never hurts to ask. You may or may not get it, but that open communication and you could give us something with a smaller price tag to make us happy, but if you actually need a whole bunch of extra offices, just give it to us straight, and we can always, not always, but we will always try to at least find a way to compromise or work around or get everybody what they need. It's important to us that you guys have everything you need to keep the city, just as wonderful as it is. So thank you for your feedback. Thank you for the level of detail in all of this. It's really helpful.
A lot of work on it.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Councilmember Howe? Yeah.
And thank you to all of you, just because sitting down and taking this time helps all of us with the planning as well, because we get to hear your feedback on what you're looking for.
Yeah, it's a good point the mayor brought up there about Bothell. I would say they're probably fortunate that they had supply closets that they could convert into office space.
Right.
I think when you're at $750 per square foot building a prevailing project like that, quite often the supply closets are even cut off of the plans. Which I do wonder if maybe it's best to maybe it's best to buy some existing structure that is turnkey sometimes. Some type of agreements that lead you to that point. What I wanted to bring up, though, was just because none of it showed up on Capital, where we were at with the most recent phase of Windjammer with regards to some of those projects we went out to the public for the survey on, and the dock replacement that we've been kicking around for the last 3 years. Wondered if there was an update on that.
Yeah, so we just finalized the agreement with Motley Nichols to do the adoption of the dock. We already have spent the grant dollars on the dock, but there is a lot of skepticism in their ability to meet all the permitting requirements and the cost of removing the existing dock, replacing it. There's also a question of whether that is a product we even want to get into. Will we have a better situation than we have now by replacing that dock with a floating dock? So that's where we are right now. We're about to do the evaluation of the dock, have that inspected, and probably come back and discuss with council.
Perfect, thank you. And as far as the rest of the projects in there that we had went out to survey on?
Yeah, so, like it shows in the, sheet there.
Page 56.
56?
Brian, they updated that image to just a picture of the park, just so you know.
So, I'm gonna run down through here. A lot of this is just in process right now. We have kind of 3 major projects that are being pulled from this fund into separate, tracking separate capital projects. That's the ball fields, inclusive playground, and then amphitheater planning, which wouldn't happen until 2027. The rest of those are all kind of listed in here. The Interpretive Center Public Access will be doing architectural services for in 2025. Splash Park improvements is all completed, and that's been doing very well. We have a few little,
Sorry to interrupt. Is your microphone on? Check. Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so the ball field inclusive playground, amphitheater planning, those are separate, pulling from that from this fund into other capital funds for those. Interpretive Center Public Access, architectural services for that next year. Splash Park improvements have been completed. Irrigation system replacement, topsoil, event-based resilience. We'll be looking at that probably towards the after summer next year. The topsoil, shade structures, improvements to the kitchens, locks, and the ADA access improvements. Brandon is working on that right now. Equipment for maintenance is already in this budget. And then the lagoon picnic areas and access, we'll include that with the dock discussion as well. We heard quite some comments from council as well as the public on improvements they wanted to see around the lagoon. So that might get spun off as a separately tracked capital project. Kind of depends on what ends up happening with this dock. But like I said, we'll bring that back to council to talk about.
So Brian, can we talk for a second about, you're talking about the topsoil and the irrigation where we're going to make those changes because right now the park is not conducive to facilitate having the carnival there. And I would really like to hear from council what their vision is for that park as we go forward before we start investing and making some structural changes. And then if that is really what we're planning to do for this park, you had indicated that those are going to be after summer of next year. Is there no way to move that into the spring so that it is available for summer and 4th of July next year? Like, can we change the timeline on that?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I don't mean to put that on you. I mean, if it's not doable, that's fine. I'm thinking about what its intended use is going to be if this is what they want. So how do we meet that timeline and make that work? So, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to go with nostalgia. I mean, Jim, you've been around a long time as well. Chris, same. We grew up in that park, right? And that's 4th of July at Windjammer Park or City Beach Park was the place to go during the summertime. And that was, I never envisioned when we redid this park that we would lose that we'd lose that aspect of it. And it's disheartening for me. I know that we all got, or I can't speak for everybody, but I know a number of us got quite a few phone calls this summer when we found out that the carnival couldn't go there. And it is something for me personally, just for the nostalgia part of it, to be able to put that back in that park. It's important to me. What's that? Yeah, absolutely. I 100% would like to see the carnival back in Windjammer Park sooner than later. And green grass and have that experience for the next generations to come, to be able to experience the carnival down there, the fireworks and all of that community building that was really there. I mean, that was the place to go during the summertime, especially 4th of July, right? So for me, it's hugely important, yeah.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I grew up here too, but I don't feel the same way. I think that the investment that we made in our park is, I don't know, I think about the wear and tear of having something like a carnival in the park that we spent so much money on to keep nice, where we also own this piece of property on Bayshore, which is a perfectly, as is, appropriate place to have a carnival. And then the carnival on Bayshore, it would link to all of the vendors and activities on Pioneer, which links to Windjammer Park, where if the carnival is somewhere else, then that leaves more park space open for people to have their picnics or their family reunions and go lay out their blankets to watch the fireworks, as opposed to taking up a bunch of park space and therefore limiting the number of people that can go enjoy it, to say nothing of the wear and tear. I would like to not have the carnival in the park. Just for that reason. Still downtown, it would still all tie together and be within walking distance of everything. But yeah, I think not having it there would be an improvement. I might be in the minority there, but.
So, and again, this is why I wanted to have this discussion. I want you guys to have this discussion because what we're looking at as a team is size of rides, mapping things out, making sure that logistically everything's going to work, parking of vehicles that go with these rides. I mean, there's a lot that's going to have to fit into the park, which is going to change whatever reconfiguration we need to do. to the park. So that's why I'm saying I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Yes, Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I'm in line with the nostalgic approach. I can remember spending many summers working in booths, helping the local Kiwanis. Well, I didn't work. I went and played and ate free hot dogs. My dad worked because he was the Kiwanian at the time. But that all of our service organizations were down there doing fundraisers. Vendors were available. It was, you walked in and you had a line of people you had to get through before you could even get to the games, before you could get to the rides, if you came in from the street side. Now you could obviously come in from the back side of the beach and whatnot. My understanding, it was, is the intention, from what I understood, I know the community's intention was they would like to see it back in Windjammer somewhere near close to it, to bring that piece back. That's the feedback we get every year. And the property that we own as a city on Bayshore isn't big enough for any carnival without the partnership of other community members. And they may not always want to leave that land open for us to be able to do that. So long-term planning, if we're going to continue to have a carnival come in for the 4th of July and potentially other, it used to be here Holland Happening too. We need to be prepared to be able to accommodate that somewhere, and we're not going to be able to if we don't figure that out. So
I will say, we did not say no to the carnival at the park. We did say they can have the carnival at the park. We just asked them to repair any damage that is caused to the park by having the carnival in there. They chose to move it to Bayshore rather than take the risk of damage to the park. And the property owner adjacent to the city-owned parcel at Bayshore asked them as well, repair the damage that has been left by the carnival. And they came back and the chamber came back to us and said, hey, can you help us repair the damage over here? So it is something to keep in mind, but there's nothing keeping the carnival from being in the park. And even if we do take those lines that are only about 12 inches down, deeper to be able to handle, larger weight and stuff, there's still going to be concerns about no matter what we do, there'll be damage there. And also stability of rides, and a lot of that's on the carnival. How are they setting up the rides? Obviously, we saw an example of
No, let's not go there, please.
Right.
No.
You're
We're not going to
off
go there.
You're off the hook, Mayor. They had a problem.
And I'm sure,
down there.
the chamber will probably have some discussion about what is the future of that. And so.
Remind
Yes,
me,
Councilman.
real
Yes.
quick, with this nostalgic piece. Wasn't there a time when the carnival couldn't be, it was really rainy or something, and they couldn't be in the actual park, and they set up in the car dealership parking lot in the back? Do you ever remember that? Or am I just having, I know they've been out there, but I thought for some reason they were in what used to be Don Boyer, at one point in time years ago in the very back for some reason, but I could be mistaken.
All right.
I know there was some conversation about the parking lot and some of the spaces there. Overall, too, there's the access point to and from the park in that marsh area or wetland area, and that bridge is not sustainable right now, so that would be another improvement. Additionally, we have other amenities or improvements that we're making to the park that are taking up space. And when we met with the carnival, one of the things that they did talk about was the size that they needed or the amount of space they needed for each ride. So it was a rather large footprint for those rides, and then the effect on parking. So there's lots of things, and that's why Mayor is concerned about having this conversation, just so we know.
The other elephant in the room is, what is this windmill going to eventually look like when it's done, and where it's going, and how is that going to impact your overall footprint in the park as well? As we don't really have a lot of details on that, so.
Can't we just drop it in and see where it lands?
It's not my circus, not my monkey, so.
That's exactly your circus.
Yes, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely imperative to restore Windjammer to the point to where it can host a carnival. I mean, I think returning the carnival and the windmill to Windjammer both are, I think, very imperative. It's, as far as I know, it's the only large enough piece of city property in the downtown corridor where a carnival could be hosted. As Councilmember Wigginstein pointed out, the larger portion of that Bayshore property probably won't be grass for much longer. The nostalgia, among many other reasons, I think we need to get that park to where it can host it. And I'm not sure if specifically they were told, hey, the carnival can't be on the grass, but I know when you tell a nonprofit or something, hey, if there's damage, you would be responsible for bringing an archaeologist and stuff. Financially, they were told they couldn't have it on the grass, if you will. And the parking lot, I would think the parking lot wouldn't be wide enough to handle, I think a tilt-a-whirl probably takes up 55 to 60 feet. I think one of those big yo-yo rides take up 85 feet, and I think the parking lot just simply isn't wide enough probably. So I think the grass ends up being the only option for it to be back at Windjammer. Looking at it from a practicality point of view, if you had a carnival in there July 4th of next year, and obviously at that point the grass is pushed beyond being dormant, the grass is killed at that point. Grass does grow really well here in the fall, so it might be that immediately upon the completion of that carnival, maybe that's when the topsoil project would want to happen possibly.
Well, the grass doesn't go dormant because we irrigate the park.
Gotcha.
It actually is right now because it went beyond stress. We had some repairs we had to do to the irrigation. That's why the park's browned out right now. But.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Councilmember Stuckey.
So let's assume we put this windmill in. Let's assume Rotary puts the windmill in. And let's assume we do the accessible playground, other things that we're talking about, without necessarily a thought of the carnival. Can the carnival fit?
That'd be a question for the carnival on what footprint they need.
So, Councilmember, sorry. When we met with the carnival, when we first found out that they weren't sure if they could meet at Windjammer, the information we got, and I should say when we met with the chamber staff.
Thank you.
The chamber staff, thank you, Mayor. The chamber staff was very clear about saying the information they received from the carnival was they needed spaces of 100 to 200 feet per ride, depending on the rides, and some of them were up to 250 feet. So that information with this planning is why we're concerned, because when you start adding up those number of rides and the space requirements, your question is valid, and that's what we're not sure. It's a matter of mocking it up and understanding that.
Because I agree that there's a good chance that the carnival won't be able to be held at the current location for much longer. I respect the nostalgia. For me, as a relative newcomer, it's not as ingrained in my memory. That being said, I don't like the idea of not doing things that benefit people all year long, like an accessible playground, for a 10-day event. I would hate to lose the carnival, but if it was have the things, the improvements people have been asking for at Windjammer Park, or not have this 10-day carnival, I'm going to choose the things that are done all year long. Sad to lose the carnival, would hate to lose it, but to me, I don't mind, hey, if you can take the windmill and you're already going to put it, but you're going to move it 10 feet this way, so the carnival, that's fine. But if we're not doing things or making major investments just so the carnival can be there, I personally am not for that.
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you. So here's where the history comes in, right? So park plan from, 2015, 2016, we hired a consultant to come in and look at, how that park should be designed. And we had all sorts of great ideas on how to fill that park up, amphitheaters and stages and additional playgrounds and et cetera. And the reality is, the consultant came back to us and said, so what are you guys going to do for large green space? If we fill up all the large green space, what are you going to do in your community for large green space? Because every community needs large green space. And we're all looking at them like, what are you talking about? What do you mean, large green space? Large grassy areas. Every community needs them. And we're not, park aficionados. We're relying upon the consultant. And so the reality is the entire Windjammer Park plan, everything that was done down there during this last round and everything that we're kind of planning to move forward with, or we looking at redoing that plan, all came around that large green space and preserving that large green space. In fact, we had, hundreds of hours of meetings about how to fill up this green space, and all the consultants told us, no, it's a huge mistake if you fill up all your green space. That you're going to have times as you come forward for festivals and, not just carnivals, right? But let's face it, the food booths and stuff even feel better on grass in a park than they do on a street. It feels more like a festival, right? Farmers markets feel better, in a grassy area on the street. So in the end, the problem we've got right now is we've got a green space that we can't keep green. And I don't care how, unless, Brian's come up with a new solution, I don't think watering is going to ever solve our greenliness or lack of greenliness down there. We've discovered the topsoil is just not thick enough. It was heavily rolled and compacted, and therefore grass is never going to grow down there. And in my vision, a park is green space. And I said this to Brian before, and again, no offense to our staff who works very hard to maintain that park, but gosh, just go down to South Woodby Park. You want to get down and you want to roll in that grass. It's green, it's luscious, it feels like you're in a park. Not what we got going on. In fact, just getting out of the lagoon and trying to walk through the grass to get to a place to sit down is painful. And you can't sit down on the grass. You got to lay down some blankets or something, because as the grass dies, it gets pretty rough to lay on. So in my mind, one way or the other, we've got to fix that problem. We've got to fix the problem of our irrigation. We currently have an irrigation system installed down there to reuse our effluent from our sewage treatment plant. It's not hooked up. We're currently paying, can you give us, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but what kind of money are we spending a year in water to try and keep Windjammer Park brown? Do you have an idea?
It's probably about $70,000.
$70,000 a year we're spending in water every single year, rather than reusing the effluent we got. Because even using the effluent right now isn't going to keep that grass green, even if we did hook it up. I understand we've got, about $500,000 worth of work to do to connect that up?
So that project was scrapped mostly because we can't just put the effluent water back into the irrigation.
Yep.
It's a health standard. They're afraid someone will drink the irrigation water or whatever. But
yeah, well, so you get, but we've got challenges down there aside from this challenge of, what we do with the park moving forward. So I just want to remind everybody, that we brought in consultants. We did a plan as to, based upon people who are experts in the field. These were people who build parks that did this, not the people who built the park. Unfortunately, the people who physically built the park for us, we've learned are not experts in park building. They make a mean sewage treatment plant, but not a great park, right? But we hired the consultants, we brought them in, we looked at filling up this park with all sorts of different stuff, and we were told, you must protect this large green space. Every community's got to have this large green space. So I just want to make sure I remind everybody of that history. So unless we want to go back and reinvent the wheel, that was always the direction and the intent for that green space in Windjammer Park.
So to that end, if we're putting a playground in there and we're putting a windmill in there, how are we protecting the green space? That's all I'm asking. I mean, it's
conscious of that as we move forward.
yeah. So, I mean, we're saying two different things up here. So, I mean, you're saying those are imperative to come back. You're saying how we have to protect the green space. So,
Best of 7.
well, yeah. I mean, it's not my decision. It's your guys'.
And
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
Were you gonna say something? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the Windjammer plan, it had originally the ball fields being removed,
Right.
and that being a great lawn for event space.
Yes.
And I think that was in consideration of us working on this regional sports park, which has been put on hold since, and so we're keeping the ball fields around.
Yeah, that long-term plan got squished a bit. Just a thought, if we're thinking long-term, how long are traveling carnivals going to be a thing? Because
Don't wanna touch
I know
this
most of those
topic.
rides are older than I am, and I don't know if they're building new ones, but I know from talking to the chamber, there's only so many traveling. Anyway, they're great. I love them, but you know, are they still going to be a thing in 20, 30, 40 years? And so do we, like Brian said about, you know, doing something around a 10-day event, is it going to be a thing at all in a couple decades? So that's something that's kind of rattling around in the back of my mind, so I might do some research on that. But if anybody knows the answer, let me know. Thanks.
As a former carnivore.
Yes, Councilmember Arms.
I'm not from here, so I don't have any love of carnivals. And Tara's right. I mean, how long are they going to be around? You know, how are they maintaining? How are they keeping people like this? And this is a short cycle. We're going to upend everything for a small event, and people enjoy it. But I think we can be creative in figuring out something to entertain the folks while they're after the parade. You know, and, you know, are we going to have to wreck Windjammer because that's not what we thought about when we built it? I mean, and we are going to have that space down where they were for a while longer. I don't see anything going on with that for maybe 3 or 4 years. I mean, you know, we've got to take the buildings down, we've got to do all the rest stuff. You know, I don't see it going. So maybe it's something we say, okay, let's put it back there. We don't really like it, but maybe we ought to do it, and then see where we're at with all the building that we're going to do on Bay Shore. Just an idea.
Well, as a point of clarification, though, are you talking about where the carnival was?
Yeah.
So we don't have any control over that. That is not
Yeah.
our land. That is owned by a
I
private
thought
citizen.
part of that land went
Part of it
down-
is, but that is not
Yeah.
that is not conducive to holding the
Yeah.
carnival.
Well, that depends on if the person wants to help us.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to. I just want you to factor that in. Let's not make any assumptions about it. Can
Yeah.
just go back there. That we are out of that. We're not part of those negotiations. This isn't our carnival. It's not affiliated
Yeah.
with the city. So,
But I think if we're going
think
to
I've made
do
that
all
clear,
that,
but-
like I said, I mean, that, you all have been here forever and I haven't. But I think doing it first,
I mean, that's probably more appropriate for a festival.
well, yeah. Again, I have no issue. You guys want to put it in the park. I'm just saying we need to be thoughtful about the other pieces that you want to add to the park as well. So, because it's all going to come into play, and then as we continue to expand and grow in population, those events are going to grow too. So, yeah, Councilmember Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, just real quick, jumping back on what Councilmember Wiesner said, I mean, it almost looks like a desert down there right now. We have to do something. And, redoing that in a manner to where it could be a proper festival grounds. Are fully functioning traveling carnivals going to be around for another 100 years? I don't know. I think they probably will be. But at least, music festivals that have Ferris wheels and that type of stuff, they're always going to be around. Get it back to where, getting it back to where we could have the car show down there on the grass, festivals throughout the year, bigger farmers markets and stuff. I mean, I certainly think getting the topsoil and the grass and the sprinkler system functioning as it needs to be so it can host a carnival and many other things is where I'm at.
Councilmember Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hard to tell what kind of, revenue our community members gain over that 4th of July weekend. I can tell you that the year we didn't have it, I think there was a couple of years it wasn't here. One of them, everybody was at home drinking their coffee and enjoying themselves during COVID. The other was coming back out of it and we just didn't have access. There wasn't one to come into town. As somebody who was a vendor at that 4th of July event down in Windjammer, it was minimal compared to what it had been in the past, right? And compared to what I've experienced since as well. And I think our involvement keeps growing as we grow, and I think there's an attraction to that. More to what Councilmember Wiesner was saying too, is the green space of Windjammer, if the infrastructure underneath the ground is at a level that it can hold a carnival, it can hold a whole lot more as well, right? It doesn't have to be just that one event. And I'm on board with that as well. I think I'd like to see, in the plans, where the playground's intended to go, right? Again, maybe I've seen it at some point and envisioned it somewhere, but, really strategize with the Rotary Club and decide, where this windmill's gonna go. That's, important to many of our community members in the park as well, and then the layout. And again, if the carnival doesn't think it's the right space, and because the windmill was there right by, if I remember correctly, it's basically right where the concrete is, outside the interpretive center-ish, right, in that general spot, if I remember correctly. It was right off that kitty corner from the lagoon.
Yeah, it's at the end of the parking on the west side, with the path coming down.
That's where they want to put it?
Park, yeah.
Yeah, so it's in a totally different spot when their original one was, where the former wastewater treatment facility was, and the kiddie pool's outside of it, right?
The idea would be visible from the highway, and you're close to
Mhm.
power and water, so you don't have a bunch of infrastructure. As long as an existing pathway.
Yeah, it makes sense, it makes sense. So, I think we just have to keep really figuring it out. You're right, Jim, the reminder of making sure we maintain as much green space as possible, throughout this whole process as we add these important playgrounds. And that, to me, that's probably one of the most important pieces we need, is this inclusive playground, beyond a windmill, in my opinion. I don't want to piss off the locals and say we don't need a windmill, but I think there's far more better uses of the green space in the big picture, and I'm in support of the majority anyways in that regard. But we have to be mindful in what we're doing down there and setting it up for the future. And if the carnival decides through using the chamber, I'm going to reiterate it for you, Mayor, City of Oak Harbor is not responsible for the carnival and where it goes. We do permitting to allow them to do business in the community, but the Chamber of Commerce brings the carnival in. That's the extent, right? That we as a city are not involved in that beyond that permitting process and safety. So we do our best to do what we can for our community long-term, and if the carnival fits into that spot, I'm all for it going back in there. If it doesn't, then we'll fit somewhere else. And I think, Councilmember Hoffmar is right. The traveling carnivals will be here in some form or shape, maybe not in Oak Harbor, maybe somewhere else, indefinitely. I can't, they've always been around as far as I can know. And yes, that zipper that broke in Island County Fair this week, right, was...
Can we not talk
It was,
about
it's been around longer than I've been here too as well, so.
Let's just get past
Just
it.
kind of throwing that out there, so, yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just on the subject of the capital planning, I think what I'm hearing is that it's important from council's perspective that Windjammer Park remains becomes a very resilient and flexible space for uses. And I think what we'll do is we'll bump up the topsoil irrigation part of that project up and address that sooner rather than later. And then I can provide council with an updated site map of the park that shows the footprint of the windmill, the playground, where potentially a proposed amphitheater would go, and a footprint of the carnival and its existing configuration. So you can kind of see how that plays out.
Perfect.
There's
That'd
a
be
lot
great.
of festivals we want to do
Yeah,
there. So.
no, absolutely. I think that's a great idea. So, all right, so we have beat that to death. Are we done? Is there anything else you want to talk about? I know you're going, we're done. So the last thing I'm going to make mention of is we did provide you guys with a copy of 2025, 2026 City Council priorities. This is draft form. This isn't what the final product's going to look like. It's just to give you some information. That's coming forward next month at the City Council meeting for you guys to vote and put into place for the next couple of years. Sound good? Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, one last thing. I actually have a correction, because I think I misspoke on this.
Mr.
So
Mayor.
The marina breakwater replacement, that is the number for the replacement. So it's reversed. So this is, the 7.5 would be for a new breakwater replacing. To repair the existing is about 1.5, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you,
right
that's
now.
what I thought,
Understand
but I
that.
wasn't gonna, we could have done that, yeah, so.
I have a question on that.
Yeah, sure.
Would that replacement be the replacement of a floating dock as it used to be, or is that open to kind of what Councilmember Wiesner's kind of discussing?
Yeah, no one's doing the floating dock thing. I think there's only 2 of those kind of made, and there's a reason why they don't do it. So it'd be a
Correct.
different style. I was checking in with Chris on what the exact makeup of what that looks like for the 7.5, and I can give you those details.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious, because honestly, if I had my wish and we could do it anyway, I'm in with Councilmember Wiesner on trying to put in the natural spit back in and
Yeah.
getting a breakwater off
Yeah.
with the old wharf, to include a wharf, to where we can actually maybe control some of the water depth in the bay.
Yeah, regardless,
A
we
little bit.
would keep the existing breakwater, the F dock, simply
Yeah,
because
it
it's a great use.
It's a dock.
Right, and we put a new breakwater in front of that.
Yeah, right out off Flintstone, that's my vote. So, there's already a big piece of concrete block out there you can base it off of.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, thank you for all your time today. Our